members, please remember that this meeting is being live streamed. You can find tonight's agenda and the background materials on the CA Board's webpage. And there are also links to these documents in the description section of our YouTube live stream. If you're virtual, please mute your microphones and phones unless you're speaking. If you're in the room, please silence your phones. Raise your hand to speak. I will record names in the order in which I see them. If I'm not seeing you, wave heartily. As we move through the meeting, I will introduce each item on the agenda. Before a vote is taken, I will restate a motion as well as who motioned and who seconded. And if at any point you have trouble hearing me or any other board member, please say so. I will now call roll. Andy?
Present.
Sherry? Here. Jenny?
Yes.
Dick?
Here.
Lynn is out of town. Tina?
Yes.
Jess? Here. Eric?
Present.
Ashley?
Here.
Lakey? Here. And me here. Thank you. Okay, our timekeeper tonight is Ashley. Next on the agenda, announcement of closed or special meetings. There was a closed meeting of the Audit Committee held on December 8th, 2021. Committee members present were Andrew Stack, Dick Bolton, Eric Greenberg, and Timothy Redmond. The vote to close was 4 in favor, 0 against. Meeting started at 7 p.m., ended, oh, sorry. It started at, the closed portion of that meeting started at 8 p.m., reopened at 8:56 p.m., and it was closed under discussions of matters pertaining to employees and personnel and consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. So the meeting reviewed several internal audit reports and consulted with staff on personnel or legal matters. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Ginny moves and Tina seconds. Are there any objections? Unanimous? On tonight's consent, resident speak out. I was ready to move on to the consent agenda. We have a number of people signed up to speak tonight, so welcome all. And I will start at the top with Jamel Howard. Do we have Jamel on the line? Okay, well, we will try at the end to see if they've joined. Okay, so next up we have Russ Swatek.
Russ Swatek, Long Reach. Two topics tonight. We talked to the board October 14th about trying to quiet the noise coming from Merriweather. The reason I'm still involved in this is when I was on the CA board, residents started to come to me asking for my help. Unfortunately, I have not completed that task yet. We thought that it would be helpful if CA would weigh in favor of their residents. A lot of CA residents cannot fully enjoy their property in peace, something they have a right to do. The next topic is, well, first off, I hope that you're willing to adopt this letter, change it as you see necessary, and send it to the proper elected officials. Second topic you probably know about, that's the non-transparency. You're not releasing the agreement you reached between CA and the Downtown Columbia Arts and Cultural Commission. When I saw the newspaper article, then I was concerned. It didn't really say much unless CA in a bad light. But I didn't get around to requesting a copy of that document at the time. But when I found out the CA was refusing to provide that document to people that requested it, I was horrified. CA has gone through prior iterations trying to not be transparent to its residents. And they were actually called upon it back in 2010 and taken to the Attorney General about it. It's illegal. You're required by the Homeowners Act to provide that information. There are no exceptions covering the release of that contract. And you should note, I think most of you have been told that there was a non-disclosure agreement in that contract. There's not. There is no non-disclosure language in the contract itself. Now, CA, which is good, because if you had signed that, it would have been illegal.
We're at 30 seconds left.
If you have a separate agreement about not disclosing it, well, that's also illegal. That's all.
Thank you, Russ. Are there any questions for Russ? Dick?
Yes, Russ. The letter, I saw it. Looks pretty good. The state, our delegation is meeting these days on local bills, so I guess there's some concern that this go out as soon as possible because we have a legislative session coming up.
Dick, do you have a question?
I'm asking, is that true?
I think it is necessary for it to go out very soon to be effective. We would like the residents to enjoy a peaceful next Merriweather season.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Okay, next up, we have Maria Alvarez. Is Maria on the line? Okay, we'll try her again at the end. Alex Hakamian.
Yes, hello. My name is Alex Hakimian, former member of the CA board. I have a few matters I want to highlight as well. First, during this CA budget-related webinar that you had in November, I want to say I was impressed with the recommendations from CA's president, Ms. Boyd, about reopening all of the outdoor pools next year and starting some new initiatives to encourage people to use CA's outdoor pools, especially at some of the neighborhood pools that serve very diverse populations. And yes, you already have a discount program for families with incomes below levels in federally based guidelines, but what's the trend in the number of people using that program? And will you be launching new ways to reach out to them and market the program more effectively next year? And for the many residents who are in the middle range of family incomes, just above those federal guidelines, what will CA do next year to encourage them to purchase pool memberships? Those families manage day-to-day to cover their essentials, but they don't have a lot of discretionary income, and they have a hard time justifying paying $480 for a play membership when all they want to do is use the outdoor pools for 3 months of the year. So please restore the pool memberships that CA used to offer, allowing access to CA's outdoor pools during our hot summers as a separate membership, and price it at a more affordable level, similar to the reasonable rates for outdoor pools that our sister association in Virginia, the Reston Association, uses. It would certainly be a worthwhile addition to the memberships that CA offers and as a key component to the proposed budget. On a completely different matter, I continue to empathize with this board in wanting to protect Symphony Woods from encroachment and damage caused by the operators of the Merriweather Post Pavilion, and I very much hope that you have succeeded. And along those lines, I support making the agreement regarding the Symphony of Lights available to the public. And as a resident request tonight, I'd like to please inform me, ask about which specific clause, if any, in state laws has allowed this agreement to be a secret
20
thus far.
seconds left.
And to conclude, I also agree with Russ having CA send a letter supporting ways to reduce the excessive noise from Meriwether Post Pavilion. The pavilion should continue to have performances, but many residents feel that it needs to turn down the volume and be a better neighbor. So this is the best time for CA to send a letter before the next Meriwether season begins. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Are there any questions for Alex? Okay, we appreciate your input.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have John D. Tomaso, sorry. You're muted, John.
That's okay. It's John DiTomaso.
Thank you.
A longtime resident. I've been here. I have more than 50 years in my home. During the protracted disagreement between CA and DCACC, I read what I could to understand the issues at hand. When I realized that some of the same persons involved with the group known as the Rouse Project were involved with this issue, I became more vigilant. I was aware during the election time of the unprecedented activities of that group. Fast forward a few weeks ago when I read in the flyer that an agreement had been reached between the two parties involved in the dispute. I read the article a few times and I came away feeling like CA was the bad guy vanquished by a victorious DCACC. Don't misunderstand me. I like the Symphony of Lights, and I think it's a great thing for our community and for all of us. But I did feel that something was going on last year when I was reading about this. I knew that CA wasn't just out there trying to be the Grinch that stole Christmas from everyone. During the fight last year, CA was characterized as the community organization that squandered thousands of dollars of lien payer dollars on a frivolous fight with a charitable organization. I wondered just how much money was spent on legal fees. With that in mind, I wrote and asked 3 questions. Some of you have seen those questions. How much in legal fees have been spent in this dispute? Number 2, since it is often the fact that aggrieved parties in a settlement are able to recoup the legal fees that they had to spend, my second question is, was reimbursement of legal fees a part of the agreement? And my third, have an unredacted copy of the agreement. Mr. Anaton, CA's legal counsel, recently responded to these questions by saying that the agreement is confidential and that my request regarding legal fees is under consideration. I'm interested in knowing how individual board members feel about these questions. Do the board members agree that this should be a secret agreement? And do they know or do they care how much was actually spent on this brouhaha? Yeah, those are my questions. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, John. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next we have Doug Lee.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is, and I live in Town Center. I often say I grew up with Columbia rather than in Columbia because I moved here when I was a baby in 1968. So the notion of Columbia was created to grow.
Could you speak up?
Doug, could you speak up a little bit? We're having a little bit of trouble hearing you in the boardroom, and maybe I'll see if we can up our volume a little bit here.
I have a vocal disability, so I'll do my best.
I understand.
It might be our volume too.
Is there any way that we can increase the volume in the boardroom?
You can reset the timer.
Oh, yeah.
With John. DiTomaso.
Give us 1 sec, Doug.
It's Max.
Oh, okay. All right. Ready? Thank you.
So I I say I grew up with Columbia, in Columbia, been here maybe in the 60s. Um, Columbia was broke people. Not, I have a strong sense of community and civic responsibility, and my name is alive because of what we've collectively created here. Today, I'm here to urge you to provide funding for the interim specialist. One thing about Columbia is the beautiful open space, pathways, the lakes, the parks. I'm out enjoying these things every single day, and I see more and more people out and about too. A bit of a social renaissance going on, and I feel like we're becoming a bit of a small city as opposed to a sleepy suburb. And people are becoming more and more engaged with downtown Columbia and using our shared spaces more often. I'm a career elementary and middle school band. What struck me for many years as odd is that we never really had a band shell. Now, people typically think of a band shell as, a white gazebo in a town square. But we have the most amazing 21st century band shell that is in itself a monumental piece of art. This is a highlight for Columbia, and we do well to support it as possible. Over the past few months, I've visited the Chrysalis to attend high-quality professional concerts, culturally enriching education events, hit shows, and a wedding. And just this past weekend, the Chrysalis was our landing point for a new free artistic event. I had people come from Baltimore, from DC, Virginia, from New York. And time again, people kept telling me they had no idea how cool Columbia was. They're glad they came, and that they're looking forward to coming back. Now, we visited a few different spots, but it was the Chrysalis that really resonated with folks. And as always, the staff at the Chrysalis was professional, attentive, friendly, always an A+. If I remember correctly, the Chrysalis is funded primarily through donations. This venue is creating community, it's inspiring artistry, and it's providing a critical opportunity for people to gather in a beautiful natural setting. So of all the things that deserve support in our budget, I put the Chrysalis high on the list. In fact, I personally have been donating to the Chrysalis since before it was finished construction. So this place is a gem, so please make it a priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. Does anybody have questions for Doug? We appreciate your comments. Okay, next up, we have May Beal. You're muted, May.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is May Beal, and I have lived in Columbia, Maryland for 50 years, and I am a resident of Dasher Green in the village of Owen Brown. 44 of those years I spent volunteering, serving on boards, working to help a great county better. I have one son turned C. Bill, who supports my effort. I want to thank the Columbia Association for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm a generous supporter and donor of this incredible organization, the Inner Arbor Trust. I come to you this evening with deep appreciation and gratitude for the quality entertainment and activities provided to the community by this organization. Inner Harbor Trust has been a beacon of light, not only for me, but many of the Columbia residents and their families and children. The Trust provides numerous free events to the public, including events that highlight our diverse community and many possibilities for children and families. In addition, the Trust has invested in making Simply Woods better by raising money for conservation, landscaping, and working with Howard Echo works to provide job training while improving the land. The organization provides a myriad of activities and entertainment, in most cases free of charge or at a nominal fee, enabling and providing accessibility for all who want to come out and enjoy a community-based entertainment. The Trust is an integral part of this community that offers a place to bring families, friends, especially children, affordable. Most importantly, it's a place open to all. It can be a place to call our own and so much more. Words cannot adequately express how I feel. My heart sings every time I think about the many wonderful experiences I encountered attending the many activities and entertainment at the Chrysalis. I ask the decision-making makers to open their hearts and minds to allocate the funding needed to allow Inner Harbor to continue providing quality entertainment and activities for all. I'm counting on you and the many other families and relatives in Columbia and Howard County as a whole. I don't want you just to focus on the bottom line. I'm asking you to understand how important it is to invest in the community, no-cost programming, and a park for everyone. Again, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts regarding the needs to provide funding to this family-oriented organization. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, May. Are there any questions for May? Thank you for your comments. Okay, so next up we have Lynn Forkolb speaking about the Art Center Advisory Committee and Town Center Community Association.
So a question, and good evening, everybody. Should I do both of them in consecutively?
So yeah, so Lynn, you'll have 5 minutes. I don't actually know how it works for 2 separate organizations, I'm going to be honest. So you have a full 5, but I think we can be a little flexible since you're speaking for 2 organizations.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much. All right, so thank you for the opportunity to provide comment on the CA budget from the Columbia Arts Center Advisory Committee. As spokesperson for the committee, I'd like to express our appreciation for the communicative process provided by the CA board and staff. Although I've been taking classes at the center since 2007, I was quite stunned at the cost of operating the center and appreciate the detailed explanation offered during the recent presentation of the possible scenarios. Many times in the meetings held, Blakey Boyd described CA, and I quote, as a community service organization, unquote. The pandemic has only reinforced the concept that our community does rely on CA as that kind of organization, and as such, we are very appreciative of the financial share that is apportioned to the Art Center. Recently, members of the advisory committee met to discuss the impact of our budgetary nut and how we might help to financially maintain our center with the continued wish to increase programming. We hope you might consider the ideas below. That's on my note. Number 1, we are seeing an increase in attendance in the ceramic studio because the center has limited daytime hours. In order to increase programming to those who work during the day and increase revenue in the future, we would need to offer cost-effective classes during evenings and weekends. 2, the Art Center is working with a very small staff that has managed to streamline processes and keep payroll costs down while keeping programs running. Students are happy to be back in a comfortable, creative environment, but we will need to increase staff in order to offer extended hours. 3, we would like to suggest that the use of volunteers at the center be considered to keep payroll expense down. We have many longtime students at the center who have expressed the desire to help wherever needed. Many of these folks are retired and have special talents that might benefit the center without incurring payroll expense. CA already has programs that utilize volunteers after an orientation program has taken place. For example, Weed Warriors and the Archives. Couldn't we be creative in establishing a program at the center similar to that, possibly considering a program that would offer the opportunity to earn a membership through volunteer hours? Finally, we would like to express our appreciation for your support and approval for the 2 new kilns in the ceramic studio. We are delighted and grateful for this long-needed update, which will increase efficiency for staff and students and decrease energy usage, 2 measures which should help the bottom line. This past Monday, I was fortunate enough to have been glazing in the ceramic studio when Lauren Morris came by to interview students and get their take on the center's value. It was a terrific experience to hear what everyone had to say, and I'm hoping it will encourage others to come to the center. I hope you all get a chance to see the video she took. Kudos for the work the marketing team is doing. The word needs to get out there, and it looks like they are looking for innovative ways to make that happen. So now I'll move on to Town Center. And so this is representing Town Center Community Association. This letter was sent to both Ms. Evans and Ms. Boyd. So here it goes. The Board of the Town Center Community Association is asking for budgetary support of the Inner Arbor Trust in the Columbia Association's FY 2023 budget. We feel strongly that CA should allocate an award of at least $198,127 to assist in funding the Trust's operating budget. This money is a small percentage of CA's overall budget and a worthwhile endeavor that benefits the entire community of Columbia. In our FY23 board priorities letter that we sent to CA on September 14th, we noted that all open space is a must-do and was our overall #1 priority for the FY23 budget out of 18 priority categories. In addition, in our August 2021 Town Center survey, open space was noted as a top priority with 34% of people visiting Symphony Woods at least once per month. Symphony Woods is vital to the downtown Columbia community as an arts and culture park that everyone can enjoy. Its cultural program, beautiful parkland, and amenities are available for all visitors, whether attending a concert at the Chrysalis, having a picnic, or enjoying a walk along the pathways and stream. We appreciate CA's financial support for yearly maintenance of the park and pathways, but would also ask for the FY23 operating budget support for the Inner Arbor Trust as CA has done in the past. This is an investment that will provide significant community benefits to thousands of residents and visitors that enjoy the park each year. Thank you for considering our thoughts and suggestions, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions. Thank you.
Perfect timing.
Thank you, Lynn. That was right on. Any
I am
questions?
to please.
Any questions for Lynn? All right, thank you very much, Lynn.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, next up we have Brian England.
Looked like
I know I
it said
saw
he left
him.
the meeting or
Oh.
something. Maybe he got cut off.
Okay, well, we'll see if he comes back on. In the meantime, we have Delegate Jen Tarasa.
Well, hello.
Hello.
Good evening. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Jen Tarasa, and I am here today to ask the Columbia Association to support the Inner Arbor Trust, and I agree with Doug Lay and May Beal, who I think said it as well as I possibly, and Lynn, of course, who I believe said it as well as I possibly will say it. Many of you know I'm a state delegate, and you may have known me for my 3 terms on the county council, but today I'm here as a resident of Kings Contrivance and a almost 50-year resident of Columbia. I've lived here since I was a really little kid, and I chose to raise my kids in this community. I love Columbia. I absolutely love Columbia. Those of you who know me know that. And I value the diversity and inclusion for all. And these are the values I believe, these values are the reason I think it's so important that CA fund the Inner Arbor Trust. When I met Michael McCall, and I think it was somewhere around 2012 or 2013, and he brought a vision of arts and culture park for everyone, not just for those who could afford tickets to a concert for themselves, and not just those who could afford it for themselves and their families, but for everyone. It was more than just the physical structure. It was the importance that the Inner Arbor was, its focus on making sure Symphony Woods was welcoming for everyone. I cried. I actually cried when I saw it. And when he showed me the first renderings of the community space, I still get emotional when I think about it. And when I go to the Chrysalis now and I see it so alive with families from all different backgrounds, people and their families and kids and people with disabilities, and people from all different backgrounds, I cry again. I just can't believe what I see and how wonderful it is. The programming that takes place there is a reflection of our Columbia values, and it's intentionally inclusive. It intentionally has diverse voices at the table. The most important theme here, I think, is the important value that the Inner Arbor brings to CA. It's a one of welcoming. For the first 50 years, people were welcomed into Symphony Woods for the first time in 50 years. I just remember going by Symphony Woods, and the petting zoo was there for a while, as some of you may remember. But other than that, we were never welcomed into Symphony Woods. But finally, we're welcomed into Symphony Woods, and it's welcome due to the physical improvements created through the exceptionally transparent process, the community-focused process to the updated the concept plan, such as pathways, the plantings, the planned gateways, the signage, the buildings, and other improvements. And when I go to concerts there, I consistently hear from the audience how thrilled they are to be welcomed here and how wonderful Columbia is and how much they love it, and that this is their first concert, that this is the first concert they were able to bring their special needs children to. I'm asking you today to vote. I'm sorry? I just didn't hear that.
It was just some feedback.
Okay, so I'm asking you today to vote to fully fund the Inner Arbor Trust funding request. As you know, the trust obtains funding from a variety of sources, including individual contributions, including tickets, some limited tickets, but including contributions from people like me. And I'm asking you to join those individuals and invest in this vision of Symphony Woods for all. It really is so important to have that type of free and welcoming environment in downtown Columbia. It's so important to me as a longtime Columbia resident, and I know that's part of CA's mission of community, and I really hope that you will consider fully funding their request.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay, so we had a few folks that we had to miss, so let me just make sure that they haven't joined us. Is Jamel Howard on the line? Okay. Do we have Maria Alvarez? Okay, and finally, Brian England. Have you rejoined us? Okay. Thank you. That is all the residents we have this evening. Okay, on tonight's consent agenda are the approval of the minutes from the November 11th, 2021 Board of Directors meeting. Now we move on to the board vote part of the meeting. The first agenda item is the independent auditors for fiscal year 2022. Andy.
Thanks, Janet. The audit committee met last evening, as you heard Janet mention, and we recommended the appointment of Clifton Larson Anderson LLP as our independent auditors. This would be their 5th year, and so next year we will then solicit for another set of auditors as we go through our procurement process. But it was a unanimous vote by the committee.
Thank you. Any questions regarding? Yeah, Dick.
I just want to point out that there was a full bidding process involved, and they came out as the recommended vendor.
Yeah, they won the contract, so this is just the 5th year of the contract, but it was done through a competitive bid process.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to IRS Form 990. Oh, Andy, yeah.
I move.
Oh, sorry.
I move.
Oh, yeah,
we
there's the
accept the
vote part.
recommendation from the audit committee concerning the independent auditors.
Thank you. Are there any objections? Okay, so Andy motioned, Ginny seconded, and the vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to the IRS Form 990.
So also, last night at the audit committee meeting, the audit committee reviewed the Columbia Association's Form 990, which is our informational tax return. The committee also voted to recommend that the CA board approve that form, and that also was a unanimous vote. The form is posted on the website. It's a public document. It provides information about what CA does, and our finances, governance, and program-related information. So it's not just a form of numbers. There's a lot of information in it, and as I said, it is posted on our website. Does anyone have any questions about the form?
I would just like to add that I encourage everyone to read it. It's packed full of information, so if you haven't had a chance, there's a lot of good information in there. Yes, Andy?
I would move that we accept the recommendation from the Audit Committee to approve the IRS Form 990.
Second.
Okay, Andy moves and Ginny seconds that we approve the Form 990 as recommended by the Audit Committee. Are there any objections? Okay, vote is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, moving on. We are here tonight to discuss the key components that we will be including in our fiscal year 2023 budget. I think Lakey's going to kick us off with some of the high-level things that we definitely need to consider.
Yes. So I was just going to do a quick few points of information that the staff sees as outstanding for key pieces that we need a decision on so that we can start to execute again starting tomorrow. The budget team is ready to go. So I did want to take an opportunity, just the way the discussion has gone in several of these meetings, and this would be very short, a couple of reference points on just ongoing operations, because often our budget discussion has kind of asked a few questions about what we're currently doing. So I did want to provide just a snapshot of all of the ways that cost management and cost savings are going on. The majority of the top half of the slide, which I know there's a lot of information, but there's a lot of things going on. The top half is really the kinds of cuts that were made during COVID and are in some cases very deep cuts around staff positions, obviously. Limited hiring, really started the restructure of teams able to eliminate positions, so really shifting what job duties are, and in some cases people taking a lot more on. Reduced operational costs, so what we've talked about in cutting, where can we reduce equipment investment, where can we reduce supplies. As anyone that has been on the board during that time knows, we made cuts to benefits for our team members. Those are very significant decisions. Reduced pay was going on. Eliminated events that are the kinds that you generally try to do for employee morale, eliminated training, limited capital spending, really reduced marketing efforts, and in some cases found a cost savings because we brought it in-house. In other cases, we went to streamlined processes like electronic payment. And then the last few bullets are really the ongoing that we do. So looking consistently at our assets, how they're performing, how it could be improved. Same with programs, same with contracts, how can they be refreshed? Are we getting the best pricing, which obviously right now is incredibly difficult. And then always looking for alternate forms of funding. So the main point I wanted to make here is that that's the situation we're in, and we are trying to incrementally, judiciously make investments that are bringing us away from these deep cuts. So I think that we feel pretty confident. Of course, there's always ways to gain efficiencies and be very mindful stewards of our resources, but really wanted to frame that a lot of those cuts have been in place, and we're actually trying to come out of them. The other thing that has come up pretty consistently in our conversations is questions around accessibility, and wanted to just give a quick flavor of the myriad programs that currently have some kind of additional accessibility that, as we've discussed in other meetings, CA is likely not doing the best job at actually getting the word out on these things. That's something that we are absolutely working to improve. But wanted to frame for everyone, which I think often we can take for granted, our open space and all of those amenities are free to everyone, 365 days a year. So that's pretty awesome. And the public realm here is something that, frankly, many communities would have behind gates. So I think that's really important to remember about Columbia, and is such an important element of who we are. Otherwise, ranging from our membership structure to school age, these are things that are both income qualified in some cases. In other cases, we have a lot of programs that are reaching out to differently abled populations, so neurodiverse, as well as for example, a lot of programs with Special Olympics that we do. We bring RAC into our art center. So there's a lot of things that we do on an ongoing basis that is outreach, that is either increasing accessibility in terms of specific target audiences, but also in terms of income qualification. So it's something, again, I think we can do more and we can do better, but I want to make sure that everyone is aware we're not starting from zero. So in terms of board discussion, that is my entirety of just the framing. There are 4 key components that we wanted to make sure we got clear direction and guidance from the board this evening as we pivot into fleshing out a full draft budget. So we wanted to talk about minimum wage and compression impacts, capital budget, cash reserves, and then grant requests. So Janet, depending on how you want to manage this, I don't know if you want me to go through each one and stop, or if we want to, you just want me to cover all 4. Do you have a preference?
So I guess in some cases, we will have to be discussing how we're paying for things. And so that's, a pretty big topic. I think maybe it is best to do that on each one.
Okay, so they're kind of formatted the same. It's just a quick statement of kind of where we are, what we see as the options, and then we are putting forward a staff recommendation. So as everyone, I assume, knows by now, Howard County did pass legislation to increase the minimum wage that in the next year actually mirrors the state and does graduate over the next 4 years. So the difference is not nearly as drastic as when we did our first estimate, because it is less than what was originally put into the county bill and got amended kind of as it went through the process. However, one of the things that we realized as we were in that evaluation process is that we had not fully built out the compression impact. And so what that means, for anyone that might not be familiar with that term, is simply the idea that while certain jobs will take the minimum wage to a set level, there is a ripple impact because you start to have jobs that had made above minimum wage that now would make minimum wage. And so there's a ripple impact where you want to percentage increase to relieve that compression, right? So that has a pretty significant impact for us. Now, for minimum wage, it's largely, and I'm generalizing, but largely our part-time workers, heavily our seasonal workers, and there are a couple of things, though, to understand that we have people making minimum wage that actually also are on commission, right? So like our sales, our personal trainers. So it's not necessarily a perfectly clean number. I will also say that it's relevant that in today's market, which pretty much looks like it's going to be this way for a while, we have to be competitive with pay. I mean, we are a nonprofit, but the impact of that minimum wage going up on a gradual basis year over year will continue to have an impact on what we actually have to pay in the market to get the staff we need. So right now, that $500,000 is a rough estimate. I want to be clear on that. We haven't fully, had the fine granular detail on the compression, but that is the envelope that we wanted to put forward for the board to consider. So there's really three ways to get at a number that's significant. And it's either adjust pricing for membership and classes, and this is kind of the idea that most of the workers that are going to be most impacted by the compression and the minimum wage change are ones that are working either where the members are, where classes are happening. There's also obviously the opportunity to adjust the annual charge. Again, two levers there as we discussed previously with the rate or the cap, or make cuts somewhere. So our staff recommendation at this point is really to allow us to be flexible as staff to do kind of a blend of a pricing adjustment and maybe some strategic cuts. That is kind of where we landed internally as opposed to an across-the-board change. But again, that's our recommendation at this point.
I just want to clarify, when we talk pricing adjustments, we're talking memberships.
Memberships or individual classes or
Okay.
programs.
But not-
Anything,
yeah.
there's a fee.
Okay.
Fee-based.
Thank you. Eric and then Ginny.
Yeah, was the 500,000 included in the scenarios, or is that in addition to
No.
the scenarios?
No, the test cases did not include, because again, it was introduced after we had developed the test cases. Yep.
Ginny?
What's the effective date of the legislation that passed?
January 1 is where they landed, because it does mirror the,
22.
yes. Because
And
it does
is there a
mirror.
phase-in? What would it go, what would be the?
It goes to $16 an hour in 4 years, right? I'm sorry, Susan?
No, so it's the first change is effective January 1, 2022, so in just a few weeks. And that is actually the same dollar amount per hour, $12.50, and as the state minimum wage that's already legislated. The increase January 1, 2023, which also impacts this budget year, is about 4% higher than that. So it's $13.75 an hour versus $13.25. And then it goes to 15 and then 16.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what are we paying right now as minimum wage?
$11.75.
Thank you.
Dick?
Yes, you mentioned benefits were cut. I would think that would be one thing we'd want to restore. What kind of benefits are we talking about?
So those were cut previously. That is something that we in this operating budget have been working to amend. So as we've announced previously.
I understand that. I just wanted to know what type of benefits we're talking about that I'm sure we'll.
Hey, Dick, right now, we're talking about the minimum wage and how we're paying for it. I'm not sure.
Well, we
is
kind
this
of
relevant
buzzed
to
right
that?
back, right away. We kind of buzzed right through this thing. We were talking about benefits being one of the things that have been cut. I'd just like to know what kind of benefits we're talking about, because I would think that would be one of the places that would fit into this overall payroll question.
I mean, it absolutely fits into the budget question.
I'm just asking a simple question. What kind of benefits got cut, and would we be restoring them? This is a foundational question.
Okay, I can answer. So again, we're addressing that in this fiscal year we're in right now. So that's why it's not in the FY23. So in this fiscal year, what had been cut that was approved by the board was the reduction of the 401k contribution. And as we reported, it's being restored January. It's going back to the original 6%. So that's all happening inside the fiscal year we're in right now. So I would not put forward that there is a need to address it further in next fiscal year.
Oh, okay. Well, that clarifies it a
Okay.
lot, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
You already spoke. Sherry, Ashley, then Andy, and then Eric.
No, Eric had before me.
But he already spoke once, so you get to go.
Oh.
Okay, Sherry.
Yeah, thank you. Like, I seem to remember that there was an across-the-board increase for staff of 3% this year. Was that correct?
Yes, that happened in July.
Okay, so that was everyone, including part-time and seasonal?
Yes.
Yes, it was across the board.
Okay, so that 1175 was part of that increase?
for anyone who was on the payroll at the time.
Okay.
Ashley?
Great. So the staff recommendation says the possibility of making any strategic cuts. Do you have an idea of what those might be?
This is something that we've been talking about, obviously, since the county bill got introduced and not knowing where exactly we would do them. I think that the key would be understanding how much staffing we need to do, because this round number is kind of based on historic staffing estimates seasonally. I think that where we were anticipating in this case would largely be towards the supply side of operations, and really not so much on equipment or, those kind of pieces of the puzzle. I would certainly not put forward that there is an easy way to do this, but I think that we are trying to adjust it as a business cost.
Is there a reason that staff recommendation doesn't include adjusting the annual charge?
The reason that we did not put that forward is in the previous 2 discussions by the board that had been pretty soundly, our reception was that that was not being entertained. But again, we did put it up there. It is an option.
Yeah. I know when I was remote when we were having that conversation, it was mostly around outdoor pools. That's why I gave the sideways thumb, right? Like, I wouldn't want to increase the annual charge for outdoor pools, but we need to pay our staff a living wage, right? We want to have the staff be happy. They should have employee morale events. There should be team building events. They should have full benefits. So in the event that we don't have enough funding, and obviously as wages are continuing to increase over the next few years, this specifically is an issue that I would be in favor of adjusting the annual charge for. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Andy?
So, I just wanted to make sure I understood the staff recommendation. So, we're looking at needing another $500,000 beyond what we had budgeted. So when you come back in February, will that $500,000 be included in the budget?
Yes, in January, late
In January, yeah, right, when you come out for us to vote. So by January, staff will have figured out the implementation of how to do the 500,000.
We will have a recommendation.
Right, okay, right. So,
yes.
So it's really just either, we, suggest to increase the annual charge, or we let it up to staff to come back and tell us how they're going to do it in January. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Eric?
Yeah, so $500,000 for FY23. Do you have a sense of how much it'll cost when the full $16 minimum wage is implemented?
That's 4 years from now, so
Yeah.
no, we didn't adjust that because there's so many questions on what our membership will be, what our programs will be. I personally hope we have some different programs by then, so it would just be a very different picture.
Tina?
So because this year matches the state law anyways, we were already planning for this, and here it is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So can I entertain a motion to take staff's recommendation that we look at possibly price adjusting and/or making strategic cuts?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Andy moves and Dick seconds. I'll do a roll call vote.
Is there, I'm sorry, discussion, quick discussion?
Yeah, sure.
When you're saying price adjustments or strategic cuts, do we understand strategic cuts could also include some of the proposed increases to the budget in terms of additional personnel or something? So it could be everything as a strategic cut. Everything's on the table with the staff when they look at the budget again.
I would say yes, potentially. Again, we really, frankly, this got introduced as we finalized the test cases, so we have not had an opportunity to fully vet what those strategic cuts are.
I understand. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't sort of be looked at narrowly based on our discussion. It's broader than that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments before we?
I have a question since I'm new to this process still. How would I guess, make a motion to include that they offer, or the staff present a possibility for a small increase or change to the annual charge.
So you could propose an amendment. You can move to make an amendment, and then someone would need to second it for us to talk about it.
Okay. Then I move to amend that the staff also offer a proposal that increases the annual charge to get us to the $500,000 to show us what that increase would be.
A second.
Sherry seconds. Okay, so Ashley moved and Sherry seconds. That
Can I please interrupt and just check with Susan on, would that be, in your feeling, running two scenarios, or are you comfortable with that?
So if the
Because it's adding a recommendation, it's not replacing
It's adding
it.
an option. So, no, we run one scenario and we would decide what we thought we should present to in that draft, is the way I would interpret that.
So I just want to be clear, we would not come back with we could price adjust, we could cut, or we could raise annual charge. I just wanted to make that clear. We would come back
if we
with,
offer
here is, yes,
this
if
as an
that's
option,
passed.
we are not deciding. That's
Yes.
the key.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah, discussion, hold it, just hold your.
Sorry.
Dick, and then Ginny, and then me.
We are coming out of a COVID crisis, and I just do not think that this is the time to be talking about raising the assessment. It would be a public relations disaster. I could see if we get down to the crunch and we're really in big trouble and there's nothing else we can do, maybe we could raise that issue. But every person I talk to out there in my village and in other villages says, whatever you do, don't raise my assessment. And it's a deal breaker. I just don't see how we could possibly do it. Particularly with some of the PR issues we have right now.
Ginny?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just for clarification on, Lakey, did I understand you to say that if this amendment passes, you wouldn't be looking at all the other things we talked about before, you'd only look at the annual assessment? No?
No, it would be included in their options.
It would be 4 options instead of 3 that we had.
No, the clarification would be staff would decide what the best option is. If we include this as an option, they will choose what happens.
Okay, I'm sorry, okay.
It will not come back to us as a scenario. It will.
Okay, I just, again, I would like to second what Dick's saying and say, I think it's a big mistake to be doing that. People are hurting, whether we believe it or not, in Columbia. And there's a lot of feelings about, no, don't raise my assessment. It's already going, it's already going up based on assessments going up. So I think this would be a tragedy, quite frankly.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I feel like the minimum wage is more driven by our membership services than overall. And so I feel like it's more fair for us to look at ways to increase memberships within reason and take cuts in that way to support the membership rather than asking the whole of the Columbia community to support something which is largely, and correct me if I'm wrong on the minimum wage, but that's my, if I had to guess where the majority of the minimum wage jobs are, it's seasonal and it's membership services. Broadly. And so I feel like from that standpoint, I would like to see that support this increase rather than all of Columbia, which doesn't necessarily use those services that are impacted by it. Eric?
Yeah, just echoing what Ginny and Dick said, that, yeah, the annual charge for many people are going to go up just because the real estate market's been going up, and as people's houses get reassessed, their charges are going up. So to compound that with an additional rate hike, I don't think it's a wise choice at this time.
Thank you. Ashley?
I think Tina was before me.
You had your hand up before, and then, yeah.
Great. So 2 concerns. One is that Columbia Association, ideally, we want to make it accessible to everybody, right? So as we continue to increase prices for everything, everybody that I speak to can't really afford Columbia Association, right, as in general. So I understand that the assessment being expensive, and certainly like I wouldn't want to subsidize, like we talked about, outdoor pools for everybody, right? But ensuring that we're able to fund the low-income program, right, and get marketing out for that, that we have the funding available to put it into other resources, continue putting it into open space. It's not like that money specifically is going into one person's paycheck. So my concern is if we're raising prices on programs, on memberships, that we're continuing to make it inaccessible for folks that don't have the funding to get membership, can't attend the classes. And again, we can go back to the study that CA funded for the millennial space, and the top answer for both questions is, why are you not a member, or why did you leave CA? And it's because it's too expensive. So by increasing the prices in that, we're just continuing to make it more difficult for younger generations that may not be reaching the income qualified range to get that discount, but we're making it basically impossible to afford the CA program.
Thank you. Tina, and then Sherry.
Thank you, Ashley, for sharing that. I think that's important to emphasize. I also want to note that we are also facing, and this is just one place where there are several options, and an increase to the annual charge, or adjusting pricing for membership, or making cuts to existing operation. I'm assuming that those will be similar tools in our toolbox to handle several of these possibilities. And so we've got capital expenses to consider. We have grant funding to consider if we're going to be able to make grants. We're in the midst of an environmental crisis, and that's going to require some serious boldness on our part to make sure that our facilities are able to withstand what's coming. And so there are a number of other variables in the world, or I'm not going to come up with the right word to describe them, but a number of other functions, variables, situations that we have to face for which the association's revenues are going to be stretched powerfully thin. If we just, this is a process question, I guess. Mm-hmm. If we decide that the annual charge tool can be used here, can it not be used elsewhere, or do we have to make that decision each time differently?
And that's up to you for discussion.
I mean, so we philosophically, as a board, agreed initially.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, so I would say this. I think it is important for us to clarify. So I would say it could be applied elsewhere.
Okay.
How much do we want to increase the annual charge if that's what we're going to entertain?
Right.
So I think that's the key thing. There are a couple, and maybe I was wrong. Maybe we should go through the whole deck so that we can.
I know there's a motion on the table, but it might be helpful, to your point. Again, we have 3 other topics, and you might obviously have others.
And so that is a good point, because there may be, this might be Ashley's thing that she's willing to, discuss raising the assessment for, but there might be another one for somebody else. So, certainly that is one of the tools in the toolbox. And, since this expense was unexpected, is it clarifying?
Yeah, I have a question. So I keep hearing that, so assessments are going to go up, right, based on real estate property, but nobody has an answer as to when. Does anybody in this room know when that's going to occur?
Yeah, so basically the way it works is it happens annually. So Howard County is divided up into 3 different real estate districts, and each district gets, each house gets reassessed on every 3-year basis. So every 3 years, your house will get reassessed by the county, and then that gets factored into the annual charge. Now,
Right.
Granted, if there's a huge jump, then it goes into, there's rate caps, so even if there's a huge jump, the rate caps will protect you to some extent.
But if you sell, it also gets assessed.
Yeah, if you sell, it also gets
So all of the
assessed.
turnover.
So it affects sellers. But if you're basically staying put, you'll get reassessed every 3 years.
So are those forecasts included in your budgets usually?
Yes.
Okay.
So what that means for CA is that we have a portion of Columbia that will be reassessed each year.
Right.
Kind of in those 3 districts. But because of the cap that is a state law, that means that it's not the full property value change. there is a limit to that, but we do forecast that appreciation.
Sherry, so what I want Sherry to be able to speak, and then I'm going to say something just because I feel like procedurally we might need to make a reassessment here. Sherry.
No, I was just going to say that, we have, this question of accessibility is also very significant for our senior population. And that's the other thing that I've been hearing. It's not only younger people who are being priced out, but it's people who have lived in Columbia for a very long time, who are, loyal, who are very much in favor of the Columbia brand. They know exactly the standard that we bring, but their finances no longer allow them to take advantage of the things that they've loved to take advantage of. So that's the kind of thing with memberships. When I look at memberships, and as we go through this, I just want to say we have resident and we have non-resident. And that's another area that I think we have to look at very carefully and maybe get a bit more demographic information, if we can, from the data.
I'd like to just point out, though, that an increase in the annual assessment impacts everybody who owns property in Columbia. So, I mean, that also impacts someone on a fixed income or younger people who can't afford to live here. So, so before we engage in additional discussion, I thought this was going to be a little bit more cut and dry than it's turning out to be. So what I'd like to propose, I realize that we have a motion on the table and we will return to it. I'd like us to have the full picture before we make those decisions, because now I'm seeing that I think it's important for us to understand what other things we're going to have to accommodate. Is there anyone who is opposed to moving on through the slides so that we can do a broader general idea of what's going on, and then we'll come back and start back here?
Can we come back for a vote, though, because we did have discussion?
Yes, we will, yes. So I have the votes and the amendment captured. I just want to make sure that everyone is making decisions with full information. Thank you.
Okay, and I will say we put the most complicated one first.
Well, thank goodness.
Yes. So on the capital budget, this is one that in the test cases, we represented at 10 million, which as a reminder is a 25% increase from our current fiscal year already. We're at 8. But because there was a previous board discussion during the test cases and multiple people brought up the idea of increase, we did go ahead and check those numbers. And we ran out if we added $1 million to that, what it would be if we added $2 million to that. We certainly would not recommend going more than 2 million more. You can see the approximate math that what really gets impacted, which I know can be a little counterintuitive, is we end up with an additional expense because of depreciation. But what's important to remember is that given our average of a 9-year lifespan on our assets, give or take, across our portfolio, any decision we make here has a potential 9-year impact. So it is not something that's a single operating year. So that's just important. Capital budget is different. So our recommendation, what we were comfortable with, is increasing to 11 million and adding that additional 1 million, which would only increase our depreciation expense by 56,000. And we feel comfortable with that increase over the next 8 years, that we take that additional million, put it in category 3, but we do want to be clear the trade-off would mean that we're reducing that operating repairs and maintenance expense approximately by 56 million. So in short, sorry, thank you. 56,000, excuse me. So again, we're at 8 million today. What we had already put in the budget was 10 million. And we feel comfortable as a staff to recommend going to 11 million. Beyond these numbers, we did check, and we really would be getting into line of credit and having a carry forward expense starting to be on the scale of $500,000 a year that we just don't think is responsible at this point in time. So that's capital budget.
Can I ask a question? Would the assumption be that we would borrow for that additional capital budget?
Not at this level.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, with repairs and maintenance, is there a line in repairs and maintenance for environmental events? We had talked about this at one point. We did not, to my recollection, we did not have that in previous budgets, although we had talked about it and there was interest in the board, but I don't know whether that ever made it in or it's been done in some way under open space.
Yeah, Susan?
I don't believe it is. I think it's more along the lines of other types of impact, but we don't break it out into that level of detail, right? But, yeah. No.
Okay, so there's nothing for a catastrophic event or anything?
Well, there would be, but that would generally require a capital investment. You're asking two different questions. So there are dollars in there for emergencies to some level. Now, the nature of the emergency, we don't distinguish between. So.
Dennis has his hand up. Susan, if you want to.
So if I could just say that we have money in the overtime.
Oh, can you hand him the mic, please?
Oh, I have mine on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see it. Get closer.
So we have money in the overtime salary line for like Snowmageddon or for a major storm in the summer. So there is money set aside for that in the budget. Is it enough? You never know year to year, but there is money specifically set there in the overtime allocation for a major snow event, for a hurricane, not for a hurricane and a snow event, but there is some money in there.
Okay, how about tornado? No. Right.
Where's the earthquake money?
Yeah, that'd be a lot.
Any more
all
good
in one
news?
year.
Okay, do you want to move on?
Okay, so the next is cash reserves. This was something we just got a couple of questions, so we thought we'd put the information in here. We did not include in the test cases any additional cash reserves. So as a reminder, when the cash reserves policy and program was approved by the board this last fiscal year, we assumed the next payment would be made in fiscal year '24. The reason for that was at the time that policy was passed, it was still so unclear what the impact of COVID was going to be. So we didn't want to kind of require ourselves to make an investment, being unsure whether we would be able to do it. So we do have a policy in place that didn't assume an addition until '24. So right now, the option before you is to keep it at 0, which is how the test cases ran already. Or if you wanted to add cash reserve funds, it really would take making cuts to existing operations. Our recommendation as staff is no additional funds for 2 key reasons. One, to actually make the numbers work, we would likely have to pull the line of credit to kind of be a gap financing of sorts, which we don't feel comfortable with. But more importantly, the good news, which we'll hear in a bit about second quarter, which everyone hopefully has seen, we are projecting a surplus, and if that stays true, which is, we have to live it out and make sure it stays true, then we would intend to allocate some of that surplus in this fiscal year, FY22, into the cash reserve fund as a practice, as a business practice. So, any questions on that? Okay, and then the last topic is grant request. So again, the test cases did not include any grant requests. That was not something when we were talking through the scenarios that had been brought up. As a reminder, this fiscal year, we kept it at 0 and wanted to, through COVID, had kind of kept that same attitude as this fiscal year. What I can share, which I do want to be clear is anecdotal, is that in my role being new, I certainly have talked to a lot of community organizations as I've been here, and several organizations asked the question, are you going to be bringing back the grants program? And our answer has been a consistent, we're not anticipating that for fiscal year '23. We are still a pandemic constrained organization. We don't anticipate that occurring. And it was just a pat answer. I didn't get any more specific inquiries past kind of that first answer. And then last week, which I had already forwarded to the board when we received it, Inner Arbor Trust made a request for, it was just under $200,000, but essentially $200,000. So in that case, because it's not factored in the text cases, that would be, if we wanted to make any grant requests, we would need to make, again, cuts to existing operations. We did not put on here the other ideas of adjusting pricing or changing the annual charge. Those did not seem reasonable to connect to grant requests, that we're going to change the annual charge in order to give other organizations money. So that's why we put, again, other options are there, but that seemed reasonable to us. So our staff recommendation is to keep the grant requests at zero for fiscal year '23. And really that we consider looking at the grant program again in fiscal year '24. Since we only received one, we did go ahead and just provide the information as a reminder that CA in-kind service with maintenance is providing approximately $100,000 per year on the ground. And that's a combination of supplies, staff time, and, you know, we kind of have a breakout of how that works. So that was, that's the last topic, grant request.
Tina, Eric, and then I'm getting in the queue too.
So this is part of, because I'm also new, is there a formal legacy process for making grant applications?
And I will also ask Susan to answer, but the general understanding is that we used to have a much more robust grants program, and so there was more of a process. And it has changed over the years. But when that cut was made during COVID, we did not put out any forms this year because, again, we weren't soliciting. We have extra money to, you know, be granting. So, Susan, do you have anything to add to that?
So there are, a grant policy was approved by the board 2 years ago, and there are, I don't have the details at the top of my head and have it with me, but.
I can shed some light, and I'm sure Andy can too, as he goes into these details. But we were giving money away with no apparent strategy. And so we had decided to give a large grant to, was it the local the Columbia Foundation or?
So I think I could clarify that much. So I would not say they were not strategic, but there were large grants that were approved by the board in the budget process to specific community partners. And then a grant was given to the Community Foundation of Howard County to manage for CA, and smaller grants were made out of that. We also, that policy also allowed for the president to make some small grants, and that's what I don't recall the dollar value. It's about $25,000, I think, but I'm sorry to speculate on that.
Well, the other thing is that when we decided to give the money to the foundation, they put one of our people on the board.
That's correct.
Of the foundation, and we had certain requirements that the money would be spent within the county or within Columbia. And what it did is just it eliminated us being bombarded with requests, and a lot of these things we were just automatically doing every year, and so it was a much better policy, and there was some money free for presidential discretion, you know, to take care of some things that might slip through the crack. And like I said, Andy probably could give you more details on that.
I think the only thing I would say is that we have a policy, a board-approved policy on grants, how they go, and there is a process internally for CA. So I think that's really the question, and it's simply been that at the last year and what's proposed this year is we simply haven't put any money. But if we put any money in the grant line, we do have a policy and we do have a process.
Thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, just how much have we allocate for grants in previous years prior to COVID?
It has varied depending on the years.
And like roughly,
In some years, it was up to $700,000.
thanks.
So my question was, okay, Sherry. The only difference I see with Inner Arbor Trust is that because they are maintaining an ACA asset, I'm curious if there are some other creative methods for, so we do have the in-kind. One of the benefits, obviously, of Inner Arbor Trust is that they can do grant funding for a lot of their programming and for things like that concept plan, which are all beneficial both to the community and to the Symphony Woods, which is our asset. So I'm just curious if grant is the right category for that spending. Is there another option that would be better suited? So it's this is related to CA. So I struggle a little bit with, I think we benefit from them being good stewards of our land. And so what I'd like to see is a way that we can support them. I recognize that this was not accounted for in our scenarios. So I'm just wondering if there are some creative alternatives for us.
So it would, and funds from CA to Inner Arbor Trust would need to be either a loan or a grant. And there's no.
Because of the corporate structure.
Right.
Okay.
Now, the work that CA does in Symphony Woods, which is substantial, is on CA's books. So we're just doing that work. It's not recorded as a grant.
Right. Sherry, then Dick, then Ginny.
Yeah, on our income tax form, I noticed that the community associations are listed, the 10 community associations and Inner Arbor Trust are listed on the same form. And I think that's interesting. We discussed before that it's true for the community associations as well, our village associations. They're not really grants. I understand why for tax purposes they're listed that way.
They're grants.
On the form. But I think there is a parallel structure strategically, if you look at it, that having to do with CA buildings and facilities. Here we have CA land and facilities that will, the park is CA land. So what you're saying, Janet, I understand what you're saying about there is a different relationship here because of that. This is a tremendously important asset to Columbia. And so it kind of falls into a different category. So I understand what you're aiming for here, and I support that.
Dick, and then Ginny.
Yes, this is a very unusual situation because basically this is our land and Inner Arbor is helping us maintain it. It's kind of an accessory to working with us on this, so it's a very unusual circumstance. One of my concerns is that every year Inner Arbor comes back saying this will be the last year we're going to be asking for money, and then the next year they come back and ask for money. We have a couple of things coming up that I think we need to consider. One is we're going to be revising the easement at some point in the next, I hope, soon. And we might want to be looking at the funding situation as part of that easement adjustment. The second thing is we have this new concept plan where we're looking at various pieces of construction, and that might fit somewhere in our capital budget.
We can't support their capital budget.
It's our land, we can put stuff on it. But this all has to do with our easement agreement, and one of the things we need to look at as we're negotiating the new easement agreement is just what the financial implications might be. And the other thing is that there might be some other things that we can do. For example, we might sponsor some events at the Chrysalis. And so I think we can look at this in a more creative fashion to see if there are ways that we can protect our land and make sure that it's being used properly.
Ginny?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. I agree with what Sherry is saying. It's very clear. The 10 village boards are here, and Inner Arbor is listed as well as promote the social welfare of the people in our 990. I agree. I think this is sort of an unusual situation. We created the Inner Arbor Trust. I really think we should not grant, let's not use the word grant.
Well, we kind of have to. I think we've established that, so.
Legally, we do have to,
Okay.
just to be clear.
As we do with the village boards, okay. But I think we should consider seriously the 200, and we should be putting some conditions. We need to work together to put some conditions that, for example, they must produce up to 7 events that are free to the public. And they must be family and children, diverse populations, et cetera. So we begin to put conditions. CA must gain something from this, publicity, our logo on their material, the president of CA give a speech at the first one or something, and CA be announced prominently at every event so that we gain publicity and recognition that we are involved in this, and we are doing it through the Inner Arbor Trust for residents, lien payers, et cetera. They're getting something from CA for paying for the lien, for the assessment. And this is our way of doing it, rather than we hire 10 staff to deliver these programs, which I don't think we want to take on, quite frankly. So I think it's a great opportunity to whatever we want to call it, partner, whatever, continue that relationship with the Inner Arbor Trust, which has been successful, it has benefited people, and we can even do better this year. So I'm very supportive of this, so thank you.
Thank you. Ashley, sorry, Jess. I'm looking at Ashley.
I have a question for Susan. You said that CA puts the in-kind, work that is done in their books. Do we report that to the Inner Arbor Trust? Do they record it on their books? Do you have any knowledge of that, or does anyone who's on the Inner Arbor Trust? Because usually you would need to record that as an in-kind contribution in your books. I'm just wondering if we're getting any credit for that on the Inner Arbor Trust side. And then
It didn't look like it in their annual report recently, but a board, we have a board member here, so I don't know.
Yeah, do you happen to know off the top of your head?
I believe that there is something included. The report was not as detailed as the records that are there. So I would certainly check on that. But the relationship between, for example, when the pathway was being put in, and CA staff were involved in that, that was recorded as an expense.
Right, so then they would have probably recorded the CA's time as donated, probably on the other end.
I'm not sure whether it was donated or whether there was a payback to CA. So we would have to check on that.
So that was one question. And then my other comment was that I do think that without a formal grant application and approval process, we should not be giving grants to anybody right now. Obviously, with the villages, we have a management contract. That's sort of a different animal. But even though philosophically it doesn't feel like a grant, technically it is a grant. And so I think at the very least, if any money were to be given, we would need to have a lot of information, a reporting process, some of the things Ginny mentioned, but also a formal application process. So I would say that for me personally, at this point, I don't think it's fair or appropriate to give a grant to an organization when we have already said that we are not giving grants this year to outside organizations, and if it means we're going to have to cut operational costs in order to do that. So that's just my personal thought. And if the board were to agree that they wanted to go that way anyway, I would feel very strongly that there needs to be a pretty stringent process for that.
Sherry and then Eric?
Yeah, just point of information, there has been an application process.
In the past?
Yes.
Right, but there's not one currently because the line item is 0. I'm saying we would need to go through that formal process.
You can just go back to what it was. And that is something that Nina Basu has suggested in her documentation to us.
Okay. Well, I would love to see that. I'm not aware of that process or the policy, so I would love to see that just as someone who applies for grants on a regular basis. I'd be very curious to see that, if someone could share that with me.
So we can, yes, we can send that out to all board members. And what Sherry just alluded to, we did send out last week what we received from Inner Arbor Trust. But you're asking for the actual policy that was in place when it was a funded program.
Correct. And what the process would be for someone to apply, what the reporting requirements are, all that.
Okay.
Excuse me, Eric?
Yeah, I think this is very different from your typical grant. I'm considering we're basically funding them to provide programming on our space and on our land that, for us to do the same thing would be a lot more expensive. So I think we got to look at this in a slightly different light than your typical grant.
Agree.
Ashley?
So I agree, Jenny, it makes a lot of sense for us to have stipulations around it, but I do think that we need to find some way to provide them financial funding in addition to the stewardship that we do for the land, because we've had plenty of community members that have come to us over the past few months, right, and expressed their support. Me personally, I've attended plenty of events that have been held by the Inner Arbor Trust, and really, I think if you walked around to most of the individuals that are at those events, they would think that event is being thrown by Columbia Association half the time. Most people don't know what the Inner Arbor Trust is unless they're personally involved and have ties to the people that are working with it, right, or with Columbia Association to be familiar with it, so.
And I would just add that I think the one thing that Inner Arbor Trust, they have top-notch staff, and they're very dedicated, and they have worked grueling hours to produce what they have. And that is something that generally can't be funded with a grant. And so that's my concern, because I'm sure if there was a way, a grant from most organizations, not this specific kind of grant. But I think if there were a way for them to fund that sort of activity, they would most certainly apply for it. Jenny, and then
A
I
real
think
quick question for either Susan or Lakey, based on Jess's question, which I don't fully understand. The in-kind services, there are other organizations that we are providing in-kind services to, I assume, when we do something down at the lakefront. The county, other organizations, I won't bother mentioning them all, but where we're doing things with other organizations and we provide in-kind services, because I've heard that word used. Hey, we're doing a lot of in-kind services. Thank us, exactly what. So are they supposed to declare this on their whatever? Are we supposed to be declaring this? We want to treat everybody the same. I don't understand.
So
Maybe there's not an answer tonight, but
I was going to say,
that's a question we can answer offline.
That's
that
fine.
Tina and I could talk to you about.
No, I'd rather, you don't have to tie up now, but I
think,
want to.
yeah, thank you. So we're at time, so we need to move this along. What I would like to remind the board is tonight we are looking at the overall. And so anything that comes back to us, we should not be changing the fundamental things that we're deciding tonight. So the annual assessment, critical, membership services, critical, how we are going to approach this. And so we could philosophically say we would like to include in this budget the Inner Arbor Trust. What comes back is how that's accommodated. We would have the option at that time, if we're uncomfortable with what that means for us as an organization, there is the option to adjust small things, not big things. So, yes, Andy.
things are pretty tight in '23. So I was just wondering, would it be possible to give Inner Arbor a grant this year? Since we're running 6.8 million, possible, and not any next year?
Interesting. Interesting.
I would reserve that to the fourth quarter. and
Yeah,
just
to the fourth quarter.
evaluate that.
And make,
No, I don't think we should tie
I'd like to,
ourselves down.
I mean, that's a,
Yeah.
reserve that, yeah.
I mean, I was thinking, that might be an option, and instead of trying to figure out how you fit it into the fiscal year '23 budget, is to look and see if we might have a little bit extra in this year that we could then give them a grant, because we can still give them a grant up until 30 April, and still be counted in this fiscal year.
It would be, it's very similar to the relationship with the villages, community associations in many ways. They occupy CA assets and buildings and land, and all of it is rent-free, and what each of those 11 entities earn on CA's assets goes to those entities, so it's quite similar, really.
So cash reserves, the staff recommendation was not any cash reserves in '23. And so I'd make the motion that we adopt that we get that one off the table, that '23 looks pretty tight. Looks like we might be able to fund some of it out of '22, if not, we'll do it in '24. So I just would suggest we just kind of say, okay, no cash reserves planned in '23, and get that one off the table. So I'll make that motion. We adopt staff's recommendation for no cash
I'll
reserves.
second that.
Okay, one sec, let me capture that. So now can we do that when we have the other motion still open?
One on the table.
Well, if the other parties would allow this motion to go ahead.
Willing to let us knock out a couple of easy wins?
I'm
Okay.
willing.
Low-hanging fruit here.
All right, so Andy moves that we accept staff's recommendation on not including cash reserves in this year's budget, and Dick seconds.
In the coming years, the budget.
Do I need to do a roll call vote, or are we good on that one? Okay, so that one is unanimous.
All right. So let's take the other one too, off the table.
What's the
Capital budget.
Capital budget.
Oh.
Straightforward.
Staff's recommendation is we can go up $1 million, which I would suggest we put in category 3 funding, which is the most critical area that we're lacking in. And it would cost us $56,000, which we can reduce out of the repair and maintenance line for this year. So that basically is a net zero. I mean, and so I'd make that motion that we adopt staffs, that
Second.
we increase, to 11 million, and we just decrease the, 56 million out of the repairs and maintenance.
Thousand.
Housing.
I wish we had 56 million to
6,000,
play
yeah,
with, but
56,000.
Okay, so Andy has moved and Ginny has seconded that we accept staff recommendation on capital spending at 11 million. Are there any objections?
I do have one question.
Yes.
Does changing the operational expense from 10 million to 11 million, would that have a impact on the operational expense? Would changing the capital expense from 10 to 11, would that impact the operational expenses?
Depreciation.
56,000.
Oh, just 56,000?
That's what it is, 56,000.
That's the 56, not
Okay.
million,
Okay.
if I remember. that
Peanuts.
right.
So, yeah, and I'm willing to let that motion go ahead of the other motion. Ashley?
Any objections on that one?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay.
Can
so-
you pull up that slide of the changes that you've made, the things you've cut?
Oh, previously?
Yeah,
Okay,
great.
sure.
Just wanted to keep that in mind of everything we're missing before we're talking about not increasing the assessment.
So capital budget,
Excuse me.
that passed?
That passed.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Ashley's question, may I ask a question on Ashley's? That was what we did during COVID. That's not Right.
But it hasn't been restored.
But we are in the process of coming back. What I was
Coming back,
clarifying
yeah.
is that we're in the process. And so
Yeah.
these reductions, many of these are in place and we are slowly coming out of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have an estimated timeline of coming out of it?
All based on budget.
Right, yeah.
So clarification, are some of these currently included in the scenarios, or they still need to be added to?
No, these absolutely are included in the
Okay.
test case to incrementally make changes again, right? Like we're changing the benefit plan to 3% in January, in a few weeks. So and we continued that incremental process. That was all the summary sheets that were in the binder, was highlighting our intent to get back to hiring, our intent to do more events and training, but it was not going from the deep cut to full capacity. It was an incremental step.
And
Just
and
to
I
be
would
clear.
just add, as needed, too,
Mhm.
like, taking a hard look at those, changes as they're needed. And obviously, adding school-age services staff, for example, as enrollment increases or they can be hired, but still being very, very cautious on, we're certainly not, like you said, bouncing back by any means to even the full staff on my team.
Yep.
Yeah, so is school age services staff included for the people that'll be affected by the wage changes?
If they fit in the pay ranges that would be impacted. So yes, anybody who's in that compression band, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're also part-time.
Right, yeah.
Eric?
Yeah, so with the staffing, is this just restoring previous positions that have been cut, or does this actually add new positions?
So there is no intent to go back to what was. So I do want to be very clear about that there. And that's in terms of numbers, that's in terms of programs, that's in terms of services. So we are absolutely strategically saying, what does the team need to be today for what we need to do today and in the future? So in some cases, frankly, we are at right-sized teams in many cases. And then in other cases, the cuts were so deep, and school-age service is a prime example, because that program was completely shut down, right? So we had to hire back from scratch. And it happens to be in a very tight part of the labor market. So that is, I think, why that example comes up so much. But there's a lot of teams that are at right size that are not the same size as they were. The positions have changed, processes have changed. And then I would say there's a sprinkling of additional hires that need to happen, and that is where you hear us come back again and again saying it's a tight labor market. So it's definitely, anytime we have an opening, it is a different circumstance than it used to be, where it just was so easy to find somebody. We have to work at it.
How about the limited capital spending on safety and necessary maintenance?
And so why that is there is that we reduced the capital spending. Again, we're at $8 million this year, and the focus was on prioritizing anything that had to do with safety, anything that had to do with necessity. So what I'd say is that, again, in the budget binder, you had all those projects listed of what's being anticipated. The heavy focus is still on repair and maintenance. We're not doing any major renovation. As everyone knows, we're not doing any, brand new facilities. And we don't have significant investment to do some of the environmental work that is, again, very capital intensive. So even with the increase to 11 million, that was just, again, to go into the draft budget, it's still a very heavy focus on these same things: safety, necessary maintenance, and what's happening in the open space in the villages.
Dick, did you have a question before?
I had a bunch of questions. I've forgotten what half of them are. So I'll just let that slide.
So there are two left.
Yeah, so let's move back to the minimum wage discussion.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Dan and Susan if you have any sense of what impact, if that was left to cost cutting and membership increases, what percentage of that you think a membership increase could comfortably cover?
So I wanted to say one thing that's probably just going to make everything more confusing, but I'm going to say it anyway. So that $500,000 is an estimate, and the first thing we will do is go back and really scrub that. You know, we've just been having to make some, you know, significant assumptions about how would we manage this impact, you know, from a compression standpoint. So that's I think is a nice conservative number, and I think that would be our worst case situation. So that's one. So we looked at the scenarios assume, the scenario test cases assume 3 to 5% increase for memberships in general, and that's normally what we do. We always, Dan and I put a lot of effort and scrutiny into where that falls out, like looking at non-resident rates versus resident rates and the parity from an individual to two-member to family. So we would do all that work. If we said we would increase those membership rates an additional 3%, which would take the overall price increase up to average dues up about 8%, that would generate $370,000 a year, assuming there's, you know, no impact on attrition. So that would take us a chunk of the way to that $500,000, for example.
And I do want to caution, because we've talked about this internally, that as Susan just said, these are rough numbers. They haven't been scrubbed. And we would have to really, and that was part of our thought about giving us the flexibility for discretion, you know, does it make sense to do an across-the-board change? Maybe we only do something, you know, you brought up resident versus non-resident. I mean, there's lots of different ways, and we just have not had the time, given when the bill was introduced, combined with moving through the budget process to get to that real granularity. And that's what we would be doing, you know, over the next 6 weeks, essentially.
The $500,000 isn't just the wages, right? Like that's the benefits, 401k, healthcare, and everything as well, right?
And that was really, we had anticipated the minimum wage, but it's really the compression band that we need to be very smart to stay competitive.
And it factors in an estimate for the payroll-based benefits, which are taxes and 401k.
Jess?
Yeah, so I guess I want to go back to where we were on the motions, and I don't recall where we landed, if Ashley's amendment was...
Currently on the table, we have an amendment to include the possibility of an increase in the annual charge.
So I would like to, I think at this point, I think we're ready to revisit that, and my suggestion would be, you know, as discussion around that we do keep that in there as something for staff to recommend. We have the option to say we're not willing to do that.
Yeah.
But if they're crunching the numbers and they're saying, you know, there's just no way to increase membership rates, you know, if we'll price ourselves out, or we can't cut enough stuff to make up all the money with all the other things that we're telling them to do, that would give them the option to come back and sort of say, if you want to do A, B, C, D, and E, then we're recommending a 1 cent increase. So I'd like for that to stay on the table, just so that the staff has that full ability to make recommendations or consider that as a factor.
Okay. Shall we call to question? Andy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, no, just, yeah, my thought is we are focused on the annual charge, but the other option, which would produce less money, but it still might fit in, is a raise in the cap. You know, the cap right now is 3.5%. You know, you could, I mean, the county's 5. You know, we're at 3.5. You know, it wouldn't be raising the annual charge per se, but you could think of, I mean, possibly raising the cap to 4%, you know, which would bring in maybe $100,000, $200,000. which might be more amenable, overall. And so I'd hate to take that option off. If we're going to go with this, giving staff flexibility to do it, maybe they can come back and say, all right, well, what if instead of raising the annual charge, what if we just raise the cap? And that would give us enough money, and in addition to whatever else, to cover it. And we don't really have to raise the annual charge.
You want all these options?
Well, no, Andy would have to make a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I'm okay with my amendment being phrased that way. Yeah, whenever I meant adjusting the annual charge, I didn't mean rate, like the 74 cents.
I think it's an either or. I think we as a board need to decide, are we talking about annual charge or are we talking about the cap? I don't think it's an either or scenario.
Could I say that you would say the rate or the cap, because the annual charge is the whole thing?
Oh,
Just
gotcha.
Be clear there. And I think what you were, if I'm interpreting you correctly, you're meaning the whole formula, one way or the other.
Yeah, either way. I mean, originally I was thinking when I saw the scenario 3 with outdoor pools, right, we saw it was like 68 cents to 74, right? So to Jess's point, raising it 1 cent, like that was really the terms that I was thinking. I'm not as familiar with the cap. So that would make sense as well. Raising memberships 8%, I would assume there are going to be multiple people that are going to drop memberships for that, right? So that's definitely a factor. A combination of these things seems to make the most sense.
Okay, we're going down to 60-second increments in speaking because we're way over. Eric, Sherry, and then Lakey.
Yeah, I don't think we should be raising the cap, and I don't think we should be raising the annual charge. The problem with raising the cap is that burden is just going to be placed on just the set of residents that are being assessed in this particular year, which is only one part of CA. So I don't think that's a wise move either.
Sherry?
Can I correct that?
Sure.
So it applies every year, so your value would go up in between that assessment year by that cap amount, because it's a phase-in, so it's got that 3-year phase-in. So. Right? That's correct, yeah. So I was.
Yeah, I just quickly, this is a tool that CA has used in the past. There's a lot of historical background for doing this when times have gotten tough and CA's had to get out of a situation, and it is historically low at 3.5.
Lakey?
I wanted to just pose the question, which I don't think changes the motion, but I want to pose that if we're also going to go back to the idea of grant request, if it's not the staff recommendation of keeping it at 0, it would be helpful for us to understand, are we looking at 500,000? Are we looking at 600,000? Are we looking at 700,000? And then that might guide what do the options need to be. But I also want to say that I think this vote is imperative that we don't frankly kind of kick the can. I mean, we as staff can make a recommendation, but if we make a recommendation that there's not an appetite to actually approve, then we're going to just be having this conversation again. So I do want to make sure that while I appreciate the flexibility for staff discretion, if all 3 are not really going to be approved, then we're going to do a lot of work that at least one component, if not 2, would not actually be worthwhile of our time. So I do want to be cautious in that. So I don't know if, is it 500,000 and it's just around compression, or because we need to come back to grant requests, is it 0? Is it anywhere between 0 and 200,000? I guess is the other question that might color some of the conversation.
You have 60 seconds, Jenny.
No. Well, I thought Ashley was referring to the rate. So now we're really talking about the annual charge rate and cap. I think the average person will just see it as you are increasing the money that I have to pay CA. And in some cases, I'm not even using the facilities. Yes, I may be using open space, maybe not. So it's going to be seen as an increase no matter how you try and sell it. And I don't think we should be doing that at this time.
Okay. Tina, and then we're calling to question.
I am hearing from so many people pleading with us to make sure that we have sufficient income to meet the challenges that we are facing.
Okay, so amendment on the table is Ashley's amendment to the staff recommendation that we also include the annual rate and cap, together referred to as the annual charge. Ashley moved, Sherry seconded. I will do a roll call vote.
Better not.
Andy,
No.
Sherry,
Yes.
Ginny,
No.
Dick.
No, and I want to make sure the minutes reflect who votes to
I'm
raise the
capturing it right
assessment.
here.
Thank you.
Tina,
Yep.
Jess,
Yes.
Eric,
No.
Ashley,
Yes.
and Janet, no. So let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in, 5 opposed and 4 in favor, so amendment fails. So now we move on to the staff recommendation of a combination of membership and cost cutting. Sherry? What? We're voting on the staff recommendation. Amendment failed.
Was that Jenny's original motion?
It's the original motion
Okay.
for the staff,
two
actually, it was Andy's motion for the
Oh,
staff
gotcha.
recommendation. Andy moved and Dick seconded that we accept the staff recommendation of membership increases and cost-cutting measures.
Abstain.
Janet?
Yes.
So you refer to the staff recommendation, that included other pricing adjustments as well?
Other, yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay, just want to.
Yes, I appreciate that.
We want to make sure we. know
Yeah,
what
so
we can do.
verbiage, actually, I'll just read it. So, oh, actually, can you pull up that slide?
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so the recommendation is flexibility for staff discretion for pricing adjustment and making any strategic cuts while minimizing impact on customer experience.
And it's been moved and seconded, right?
It has been moved and seconded, and now we are voting. Dick?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
I vote yes. Jess?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
And Andy?
Yes.
Okay, so motion succeeds 8-1, or 8-0 to 1. Okay, so our last point of discussion is the grant request from Inner Arbor Trust. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding funding for Inner Arbor Trust?
Yes, I would.
I had my hand up first.
Jess?
My motion would be that we go with the staff recommendation to keep grant requests at 0 for FY '23 and to continue stewardship of maintenance of Symphony Woods at a value of approximately $100,000 a year.
I second.
Okay, Jess moves and Tina seconds.
I would like to speak.
Discussion? Yep.
A couple things. Given the absence of a formal grant notice of funds, no, there was no NOFA, because we didn't have any funds available. The absence of a formal process and rubric for decision-making on grant funding. This request that we have received is irregular. I also want to notice and note with all due respect that extraordinary staff and grueling hours is a function of nonprofit world. And after 30 years of experience in that world, I can tell you all that most of the folks who work in nonprofits are extraordinary and work grueling hours for the betterment of our communities. And there was a third point and it's gone.
Okay, well, you're at 1 minute, so. Anyone?
Sorry about that.
Did anyone else have any comments, discussion? Okay, I'll call a roll call vote. Ginny?
Could you repeat the question?
The Motion on the table is to accept the staff recommendation for not funding the Inner Arbor Trust grant request.
That's not the staff recommendation. The staff recommendation is to keep grant requests at 0.
Oh,
I'm not sure how that's different, but okay.
well, what was Jess?
Not grant the request is 0.
No, we
Well,
have
no,
one grant
my
request.
motion was to keep grant requests at 0 for FY '23 and for CA to continue its stewardship and maintenance of Symphony Woods at a value of approximately $100,000 a year.
We have happened to have received a grant request for $200,000.
Okay, Tina.
Okay,
We got it. Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right, roll call vote. Ginny?
No.
Tina?
Yes.
Eric?
No.
Ashley?
No.
Jess?
Yes.
Dick?
This is accepting the staff proposal.
No, this is, well, no, it's accepting 0 grants.
What?
So, yeah,
It
keep
is
grant requests
accepting the
at
staff
0.
recommendation. Yes.
Yes.
You're voting yes? Is that what you said? Okay. Sherry?
No.
Andy?
Yes.
And I'm voting no. Let's see, so that comes to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against, 4 in favor. Motion fails.
Okay, I'd like to make a quick motion then.
Okay, Ginny?
Yeah, and I'm not going to put a lot of discussion in it, but I'd like to move that we fund the Inner Arbor Trust request for $200,000, and I do not, and we will be having a chance to set conditions on that, but I do not consider that opening the whole thing for grants in the budget. It's simply like we treat the village boards, like it's on this form, so
Okay, let's
that's
keep it
about
concise, please.
Robert's Rules of Order wouldn't let you call for a revote.
What?
It's not a revote.
Well, she's basically saying, let's vote again. We voted to make it a 0,
And it
0
failed,
grants.
so
And
now
it failed. So now,
making a motion to fund it.
For 200,000, which is very specific.
but only the prevailing party can ask for a revote.
It's not a revote.
It's not a revote, this is for $200,000, it's not in the grant category, that was the grant category. I'm saying this does not apply to.
Do we have a second for Ginny's motion?
I'll second it.
Eric seconds.
I have a question.
Yes.
So since the only option that's up there is make cuts to existing operations, is there any flexibility in that for the staff to say, hey, we can get to 100,000 by cutting this operations, right? 200,000 would require cutting up to this operations. Okay.
So Ginny,
No,
will you-
not the way the motion.
I was going to say, Ginny, will you
right,
accept a
yeah.
friendly amendment
I would
to-
accept a friendly amendment.
Yes, okay. That, I would like to amend that for the staff to propose a breakdown of priority of which operations would have to be cut to get to the $200,000.
Or could I do a friendly amendment?
Wait, let's just make sure,
Yeah.
this is, I don't want to be creating a operational nightmare for the
Right, yeah.
team.
This is a point of order, and I think anybody who's got their Robert's Rules of Order should pull it out. We have voted not to make any grant requests. We have voted that. That was a successful prevailing vote. Now, we're coming back, and we're saying we're going to make a grant request. That's a contradiction of the vote that just took place.
No, that
Point of order, that vote failed.
Failed,
the
it
motion.
failed.
That vote failed.
That motion failed.
Okay, the motion to not make grant requests?
Correct.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Failed
I
5 to
must have been
4.
asleep.
I'm not sure how many times I need to say it, but yes, it failed.
I am willing to accept a friendly amendment if you would also say it doesn't necessarily have to be required that they look at only operation cuts. It could be
Oh, yeah,
some
absolutely.
other way that they come up with a creative way of funding, but make the
Sure.
proposals to the board.
Is this a feasible
Flexibility is the
request
thing.
for- Yeah,
We need a dollar amount.
yeah.
200,000.
And you said 200, that's my point, is it was 200.
So
but
maybe the
Yeah.
friendly
if it's
amendment would
anything
have to
between
be.
0 and 200, That is
I
substantially
could see like
more
a
work.
50,000
At least
or
200.
100. At least 200. Up to 200 being the max.
I think. I accept that.
I think
Need a
like
minimum, I think.
50.
No.
No?
Could I make a friendly amendment?
you can try.
I'll try. To consider.
As long as.
To consider two values, 100K and 200K.
What, I'm sorry, what?
Say that again?
For the staff to consider two values for this grant request of 100K or 200K. In case the 200K is not feasible, to consider 100K.
Yes, it's
Okay.
better than 0 to 200. yeah.
That makes sense.
We'll,
Two integers.
And from
Let's go with
whatever way
Eric's.
they
Yeah.
want, not limited to what's up there.
Operations, right.
Thank you.
really
Okay,
have
I consider that a friendly, very friendly. If anybody wrote
okay,
that
so
down, I
can
hope.
you verbalize that one more time so I can
Probably
capture it
not.
here, please?
I'll try. I'll try. So I want to make a friendly amendment for the staff to consider the dollar values of 100K and 200K. In case 200K is not feasible, that they'd also consider a 100K grant.
And present it back to the board?
Yes.
With both options, okay.
No, with whatever, I'm interpreting that as whatever they decide is feasible.
Correct. Will be accepted.
That is the amendment. So if you accept that, yes. If no, then that's, if they come back and say 200's totally off base, but 100 we can manage, that's what we're going with.
But
I
they,
suggest
but
you
they,
better-
but they try to get to 200K.
Well, they got to explain why they can't.
Yes.
I mean, they just can't say we didn't,
Tina?
I don't know if it's permissible to ask a question of another board member. Can I? May as well. I'm gonna give it a whirl.
You know, I'm pretty sure the rules are out the window at this point, so it's all good.
No.
Dick, you said something earlier, and I haven't been around long enough to know the backstory, and I would value hearing it. You said something about the Inner Arbor Trust has asked for funding and said this would be the last year, and then asked for funding. And from the way that you said it and what I understood, that they have done that a couple of times, and I would value hearing that history because I don't know that.
Every year, they come asking for more money, and every year, it's a finite amount, and we're going to be self-sufficient after this.
Well, I think we had COVID in the middle of this.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
I was asked, I'm sorry, I want to hear.
But you guys, COVID did enter
COVID
into
did
this.
us too.
But yes,
We're still in COVID.
that's been the pattern, that they are supposed to become self-sufficient.
Where does that come from, please?
The original plan was that they would become self-sufficient. They had projections that were unrealistic. The difference is, the first time we started funding them operationally, they were not providing any program. Now they provide programming of value to our community, and that's the difference in my opinion. When this started, many people on this board were not supportive of funding them for that reason. Now that they have a track record of community programming, diverse and cultural and free community programming, that's the difference in my opinion. So, I mean, I'm interjecting my bias.
And
That's accurate.
There's a lot of
That is
information I don't
accurate.
have,
Yeah.
and
Tina,
I appreciate that
that's
information.
inaccurate.
That is very accurate, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
I'd like to.
sorry,
say
yes,
something.
Jess.
Yeah. So I would like to propose, I guess we would call this a friendly amendment, or, sorry, we might as well just go there. That this grant request be contingent on the signing of a global agreement around Symphony Woods and the easement revision being completed by the time that, the beginning of the fiscal year, I guess, when we would have to give the money.
Disbursement.
Yeah.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
It's a friendly amendment, doesn't need to be seconded.
Or if we could say that, I could reword it as that
I think that's,
disbursements of the funds does not happen until those two things have been done.
Okay, I don't accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Okay, but you can make that amendment if somebody seconds it. It's not a friendly amendment, it means we
An
have to vote on
unfriendly
it.
amendment?
yes. You can make a hostile amendment, yes.
I will make a
The normal amendment.
a
Disgruntled amendment.
It's a regular amendment.
A determined amendment that I believe that, that those requirements should be placed on disbursement of the funds.
What were the two requirements?
Global
Global
agreement
agreement.
for Symphony Woods, and what was the other one?
Easements. See, I'd like to separate the easements out of that. If, I could probably get on board with the global
Are you friendly
agreement.
amending the?
I'm sort of friendly amending the disgruntled amendment, yes.
Some of this is operational.
Right, I mean, I think the easements, we
not
really
budget.
can't, that's not something that we can determine because that rests
Okay.
with staff
Well,
at
that's
this
fair.
point.
But it
I don't
doesn't
know,
need to
though.
be-
It's possible global agreement does as well, and that's, I think I'm looking for some guidance
I
on
don't
that.
even know what that means.
Well, I think it depends a lot.
I think that, well, obviously, we're in a little bit of strange territory here, but I would say that if you wanted to tie it to the disbursement of funds, if the funds are approved, I do think that there is some discretion there by the board that we then would operationalize how that determination is met. I would also probably say that there are two separate issues here in terms of an agreement versus the easements, frankly, because that is going to be a multi-month effort that I can't 100% sit here today and say that could be met by April 30 to be ready.
That's
met.
fair.
But
Well-
again, if you tie it to disbursement, I guess you could slide it.
So that's less of my concern, because again, the easements is, that discussion started before I came on the board, and I know that's something that other people feel strongly about. My big concern is that we need a signed global agreement for Symphony Woods, a four-party agreement that everyone can live with. And I believe that disbursement of funds should not happen until we have that in place. So that is the nature of what I would like to propose as my
I have a
amendment.
clarifying question in terms of, can we table the discussion of what that operational discretion looks like for a future conversation, or does that need to be attached to this tonight?
Operationally, I don't think we have to have that answer. What we're doing in the draft budget is figuring out
Yeah,
what
either
amount of
way.
money do you want us to figure out what to cut to make it work. That's what we need tonight.
So
I don't know, I think it's a board decision if you want, in order to say we're going to give
Strings to
money,
put on something.
you know. I think that's really a board decision. What staff needs tonight is an amount of money.
Yeah.
Which I think-
Andy, and then let's,
So,
100 or 200.
so I will ask Blakey and Susan, could we simply put the money, either 100 or 200,000, in the contingency fund? And then it goes in the budget, you know, it'll be programmed, but it doesn't go out of the contingency fund until the board votes to release it.
Yeah?
I love
So,
that idea.
I mean, that way, you know, it's in the budget,
Yes.
but a future board will then have to decide, but at least it'll be programmed.
That's true. I mean, that
But
is
then
another
that-
mechanism.
Right, and then we don't have to worry about, right now, specifying exactly
Those
what.
terms are,
you
right.
know. We can argue that at another meeting.
Ginny has accepted your suggestions, so now,
As a friendly amendment. Very
grant for Inner Arbor Trust will be either 100,000 or 200,000, depending on staff recommendation and based on cuts. And money will be placed in the contingency fund and released with board approval. Is that enough information in that?
Excuse me, could we say, you're saying, and based on cuts, and may be based on cuts, because
It
it could
has
be
to be.
another way that they find that
That's true.
suddenly the revenues come in higher. I mean, you shouldn't limit ourselves.
I'm going to give everyone scratch-offs for Christmas if you hit for 200.
You've got it. Just some flexibility there for Susan, who really wants
Okay.
this, right?
Calling to question. Andy,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
Ginny,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Tina,
I think yes.
excellent. Jess,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Ashley,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So unanimous. Go team. Vote is 900. Motion passes. Does that cover everything, Lakey?
Yes, thank you very
I
much.
dare bring up one thing, though.
Oh, I
So we've seen a presentation on the lakefront. I know I've mentioned this before, and so I'm curious, is that something that we can at least consider for our increase in capital expenditure? So I'm not sure we need to vote on additional funds for it, but I would like to get the pulse of the board in terms of the idea of investing in our lakefront as part of that additional funding.
Do you want thumbs?
Well, yeah, that would work.
What do you mean by investing in
So-
our lakefront?
So we have a minimal amount of design funding in this year's budget that we haven't yet spent, but I think it will be more than that when it comes down to it, because I think it's 100K, right, Andy? Is that? And designs, so this would be looking at CA land at the waterfront and creating new designs to incorporate with all of the other development that's happening there.
It's like enhancements or something.
Exactly, and,
Okay.
Potentially a stage, or, I mean, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty.
Right, right, right.
That main space from Clyde's to Haven, where CA's critical lakefront property.
It's more of a plan, not actually construction or anything. It's more of a plan.
I don't want to put constraints on it. What I'd like us to do is start the process, because we all know that design to completion is a multi-year process.
Right.
If we put nothing in next year's budget, then we've lost time. Eric, and then Sherry.
So would this come at the expense of other capital projects in the budget?
It would, yeah.
So do you have an idea of which ones that would come at the expense
Well,
of?
we don't know what would be, so we just added $1 million to the capital budget tonight.
Okay.
I would expect if we're looking at design funds, it would be less than half of that, so maybe a third of that. And then there would still be additional funds for other capital projects.
Okay.
Sherry, then Dick, then Ginny.
All right, so we went through a design process for the lakefront several years ago, and which was pretty much rejected by the board. Nobody.
I wouldn't call that a design process. We were presented with a plan that there wasn't a process.
Okay. So I'm looking at this as being something that is a bit higher level. So it is not a plan per se for what's going to go where, but it would be more a strategic looking to the future. Is that what you're thinking of?
I want to start the process. I'm not specifying what the funds would be used for. Yes, so I mean, the idea is to eventually we rethink and reimagine our lakefront property and take advantage of any of the other changes, but also we be part of the conversation when it comes to developing that land. Obviously Howard Hughes has a lot of plans for the lakefront. We want to make sure that when they start talking about design guidelines and those sorts of things, that we are part of that conversation. If we have zero plans, then we will just react to whatever's put in place. There's already a lot of plans in place. I think we're a little bit late to the table already. But if we wait another year, another 2 years, then we're just going to have to wait and respond to whatever it is anyone else at the lakefront puts in place.
All right, then just for a point of information, I think where we got stopped last time was also in simply not knowing what pieces of the lakefront CA actually owned. And there were some surprises that came up during the general plan process and such. So I think a good place to start, if you're talking about 100K, would be to, GIS exactly what is
I don't think
CA's
that's going to
property.
cost 100K.
Dennis has his hand up.
Dennis?
Let me turn this on. So my thought is that there's the midterm and there's long-term. And the long-term solution for lakefront is probably millions of dollars. The midterm solution, which is today and which we're behind on, is if you go down there, it looks like we have forgotten it a little bit. And so my suggestion would be to create a midterm solution, understanding that we don't have a long-term plan really from Howard Hughes, although one's going to come forward. When that comes forward, we're in the middle of it with some design funds. We also set aside some money for the midterm so that we don't, perfection or good is the enemy of perfection, or whatever that goes.
The perfect is the enemy
Let's do
of
something
done.
now. Let's get something done, and you can do 30% of something, and it's going to look 80% better. But we're doing 0, and everything down there looks really tired. And so an idea as simple as creating a nice band shell down there for the midterm, like the flag tower. That was a midterm solution, and it's okay, it works. It's not the long-term solution, but it'll be up to 5 or 10 years. And so my suggestion would be to look at it in those 2 buckets. One is the immediate term. Let's do something now that we can get up and we can have a solution for what it looks like now. Then understanding that long-term, it's going to be fabulous, right? It's going to be incredible there in 10 or 15 years. But right now, it's way short of incredible. But something better wouldn't cost us that much, and we can make some forward progress.
Dennis, one question. We do have a plan showing where our property lines are. I've seen that. There's no question about that at all. We know what we own and what they own.
No, we don't.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, then let's share it.
Well, the board hasn't seen it.
Can that be added to the shared drive?
Yeah, that would be good.
Thank you. Eric?
Given how integral the lakefront is to both Howard County and the future Howard Hughes developments, is it possible to get grant money from either entity to help make it beautiful for all parties involved?
That's a good idea.
We're a C4.
I'm always open to looking for money, but the county spent some money on Bailey Park. Howard Hughes spent some money. I'm not sure which other partner would bring money to the table for this.
Those were the 2 partners I was thinking of, but
Andy and then Ginny?
Yeah, okay, so we have $100,000 in the budget now, in the capital budget that can be spent. It's a capital line we put in a number of years ago. So I guess my question for Dennis is, go with the midterm strategy. Does 100K get us started, to allow, and can the planning be done in fiscal year 23 with a targeting of 24 for actual construction, which would allow, because I worry that we could put money in now, but we're really not going to end up spending it because we're going to end up having to take, several months, because we're not going to start this now. We've got too many things on our plate already. You're looking at probably next fiscal year anyway.
So if you parse out what you think you need in the immediate term, so let's say you need new trash cans, you need some new furnishings and fixtures, and you need something like that band shell, then yes, you could design that. And if you don't try to turn it into something, you don't put a chrysalis down at the lakefront. And think about what's at the park. What's the park by Poets and Busboys and Poets?
Colorburst.
Think about that band shell. That looks terrific, and you don't need much more than that for the lakefront to really dress that whole area up and create something fresh. And that draws your attention right to the center.
Well, what does 100,000 buy you?
Yeah.
So I think you probably need to my midterm vision, which I'm selling really hard right now, is probably $300,000, $400,000.
So you'd like another 200,000 on top of the 100,000?
250 to 300 is what I heard.
Yes, yes.
But that lakefront is incredibly important to Columbia. And you can't imagine how many people are down there. If you go down there during the week now, it is incredibly active.
I would also like to point out that Dennis has proven that he is capable of identifying things with big impact and not blowing the bank. So I think to your point, you do 30% increase and you see 80% of the improvement. So I think, with the right funding, we can make a significant improvement that does not have to break the bank. So anyway, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty, but I would like, yes, Susan?
Well, I think that the motion that was approved was that $1 million go to the category 3 allocation that gets spread based on the value of the assets. And I think what open space gets a third of that roughly anyway, right?
She's trying to say a third is enough.
Okay, well, no, I think I was just trying to provide guidance in the sense that we did just increase it 100, or, $1 million, and I wanted to get a sense of the board with, I don't think it requires a vote, but, so Ginny was, okay, yeah, we'll do, let Ginny
Okay.
talk, or we
Yeah.
can just do thumbs.
Yeah, well, a third is, say, about 300,000, and Andy says there's another 100,000 left, so you got 400,000. But what I like about this is everybody else is planning for the lakefront, and we're not. And this is proactive, not reactive like we usually are. So I think this is fantastic, and we really need to do it.
Okay. So thumbs up, thumbs down, this is just a loose. All right, and Jess doesn't get represented, but, we have the gist. Okay, so I just wanted to sort of get that out of the way because I think that is a really important thing and it's timely.
Are we still talking capital budget here? Yes.
Are you pitching something else? Is that what you're saying?
No, I just want to know if we can put that 6-pence tot lot to bed.
Oh, we are not talking tot lots tonight. That is no. No, I'm serious, Dick. We're not talking about tot lots.
I keep hearing about it, just wondering where it stands, that's all.
Nope.
Don't
No,
go
that
away.
is not on the agenda. We are not talking tot lots. We're moving on.
Are we going to financial reports?
Yes.
So thank you for the budget guidance, all.
And the
Thank you.
we are all going to have.
All right, board discussion, moving on to financial reports and updates, the fiscal year 2022 second quarter.
Well, I can say on behalf of the audit committee that we did review the financial reports, and we sent them on to the board. Thought they were pretty good, so.
And I'll do a quick overview of highlights that, I pulled out in my letter. Andy already gave away stole the thunder that we are well above, ahead of budget. Susan will go in the details of kind of how we've achieved that, but I wanted to highlight a few things. We're feeling very positive. I think that, I want to continue to acknowledge the hard business decision around the closure of the Haven, but the fact that that is giving us some financial performance that we were hoping for, so that is positive. I want to be very clear that it's exponentially positive because of the hard work of the team on getting a sublease in a commercial market so quickly, which again was quite remarkable and part of our kind of ahead of performance. I do want to also celebrate that as an example of our continuous looking for alternate funding sources, our school age service team was able to get a grant from the state of over $800,000. And that is something that is significant and is an example of what our team is doing all the time. What are other ways that we can find to fund our efforts in the community?
Excuse me, what was that for? What's that going to?
School age service.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And then the other component that I do want to, as much as I want to celebrate because it is good news, we're also mid-year. And so we do need to be realistic that that could change over the next 6 months. And we will continue to manage the resources very judiciously. I think that's what you're seeing is really a streamlined operation that is able to be ahead of budget, as well as being real about the constraints. Part of the reason we're ahead and have had less spending is because of supply chain issues and is because of the hiring challenges. So we have some funds that would be being spent on staff if we were actually able to hire them. So I would characterize it as mostly good news, but it is still tempered with very much still COVID realities. But across the board, even outside of the financial team, I just want to recognize operations that have really continued to perform ahead of budget. And that is something that I think culturally we're very proud of at CA. So.
I really don't have a lot to add to that. I mean, I think that's the big picture analysis. So year over year, the issues are all COVID, really, that we are, our performance compared to last year is much stronger as people return to our programs, as they continue to feel comfortable engaging with us and buying memberships and doing all the things that they do. The annual charge revenue, we have at our normal year-over-year change of about 3%, and compared to budget, it's favorable by 4%. We've backed off on our level of concern about the commercial abatements we were anticipating. We have not seen them through the first 6 months, so we have seen a lot of tax credits, and we'll just continue to keep an eye on that. So I just wanted to point that out. And as Lakey mentioned, the strong expense performance, very favorable variances in most categories except for fees, where we've had to rely on outsourced IT leadership, outsourced general counsel till Wes thankfully got here. And so those things will tail off, but we then picked up spending in the open space on some fee-related work there. So overall, it is a really good picture, but $2 million of this variance is the Haven. It is non-cash. It's one-time thing, and so we have some unique things going on this year.
I would just like to say thank you for your fiscal leadership. Thank you, Susan, for always taking a conservative approach, because that's what puts us in a very positive position at the end of the year when things work out better. Excuse me. So just, I appreciate the leadership and the hard decisions that I know that you've all made in the past year, or two quarters, but longer than that, for sure. Any questions on the financial statements? Okay. Thank you. All right, moving on to the dashboard.
So I took a look, reviewed it again this afternoon, and there is nothing on it that gives me any concern. We're tracking very consistently with the previous quarter, so those financial metrics look fine. Dan has asked for some really prudent and timely changes to the Clara Bridge dashboard, so you might want to review those, please.
Yeah, quickly, out of expediency, because some of the discussions were longer than expected. The Clara Bridge survey, again, that's our quarterly survey, was again our best ever. This is the third time in a row. I hope I continue to say that forever. The real key metrics are staff. People are really happy to be back, and the staff is doing a great job. If you look at the word cloud, it's staff and friendly and helpful, and is what pops up a lot. Net promoter scores rose across all divisions except for aquatics. Aquatics, there was a little bit of pushback because the pools were closing for CNSL at night, and some cleanliness. But across all the others, and the fitness clubs were insanely off the chart comparatively. They were up 8 points from last time. The real big thing that I wanted to point out here is this is the first time we have introduced some secondary demographic questions and identifications. Within Spectrum SNG, our member management system, we capture birth date, male and female, and age when you join. And age, sometimes that's not even right. We have a lot of people who are born in like 1900.
Is this going to affect the program at all?
No, it doesn't. But we have been, in the comments in the middle for previous surveys and even on this one, I'm able to parse out some things based on different age groups and different gender, male and female. We added this time 3 additional demographic questions, which are voluntary for those who are taking the survey to answer. The first is gender identity. And the options male, female, gender nonconforming, or other. And you're going to notice on all 3 of these, there's a lot of prefer not to answer. And I think that's a lot of, it's the first time we asked this question, so some people were like, we did get some, why are you asking this? Even though we explained in the survey that we want to know our members better so we can serve them members. So I expect over time, as people get used to seeing that, we'll see that prefer not to answer come down. But interestingly, on gender identity, and this is not unusual, most of the respondents were women. A majority, slightly more than half of our members are women. Main members on our memberships are women. The second question was ethnicity and race. A myriad of options: white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, or Latino, other, which we had a not significant but not insignificant amount answer that question, and we looked into it. Middle Eastern was what populated that group mostly. Native American and Pacific Islander. And then the last was sexual preference, with straight, bisexual, gay, other, or queer. So really begin collecting some information, and we've already built the dashboards out where I can filter and begin to see on each of those identities as well to start seeing what feedback we're getting from those groups so we can act on it. Right now, the numbers are small. So really we're dealing with individuals rather than more global concerns. But it's a great entryway into really understanding our entire community and breaking it down.
Question. I didn't hear you on the race and ethnicity question say anything about like more than one or multiple races. I'm just wondering, I don't know if that's something that can be added. I just know from my experience of tracking demographics in this area through Girls on the Run, that just because of the nature of the type of Columbia's history, that may be a larger demographic here than it may be in other places. So I would just encourage to consider that as an option, besides just other, that multiracial or might be a good one to add.
Eric?
I do have just one general question on the dashboard. So I know some of the metrics have goals, such as new membership acquisition has a goal but then other metrics don't have goals, such as membership market share. So do we want to try to establish goals for all the metrics, or I'm just trying to figure out why some have goals and some don't?
We were able to agree on some goals, able to agree on other goals.
Yeah, this was developed by the board.
Yes.
I just wanted
And
to be clear about that.
This is just an open question to everyone.
But that's why some have.
Market share has been a pretty sensitive topic in the past, and there are a lot of varying opinions on how relevant and or not relevant or realistic, certain goals are. So that was why I think we did not establish one originally. Tina?
Would it be possible to contextualize the gender identity, race and ethnicity, and sexual preference against the stats for the community? So that we could see
are we mirroring
gaps?
the
Are we mirroring the community?
Well, that's a tricky one because this survey is limited into only people who have checked into one of our facilities.
Right.
So
it'd be an outside data source.
Well, yeah, no, but I'm just saying it's not really truly representative of all of our members.
But it is representative of the people who have checked into one of our facilities.
Well, of who responded to the survey.
Right.
So, yes.
Great.
So we could break it down like that, but I'm just, the correlation, because I thought of that and I was like, I was struggling to make the connection because a very separate demographic, or, yeah.
I'm not sure you have a random
Slice of the
sampling.
pie.
No, but it will begin to give us a sense of the flavor.
Yeah, whether it was a large enough sample size. I don't have it in front of me. How many respondents were there?
To 1,200.
1,200. A good amount.
Right, so it's not going to be scientific, but it
Yeah.
will begin to get at some of these.
But many of them indicated not answering, just for the record. So I do want to caution that I would suggest doing that after at least one more quarter. There was a lot of, so we included language, and, you know, again, this is all part of our DE&I effort, is to make sure we're understanding who our members are. And so we included language saying, we want to ensure that our facilities are welcoming to all. And it would really assist us, if you answer these questions, to help us assess whether that is true. And I think for the first survey, and we talked to Claire Bridge, the consultant that does this, we feel positive that we got answers, but I would just caution extrapolating much until we've at least gone through 2 cycles. I mean, that's at least my recommendation as somebody that has dealt with a lot of data. We've reported it, but I wholeheartedly agree that we should compare it against the census
Community.
profile for sure.
Right, so that we know, raise your hand if you're not here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dan, can you help me understand the difference between cost of new membership acquisition and average cost of new membership acquisition? So this is on page, well, I don't know, 63 in the packet, but I don't think that's helpful to you. So it's like it's the number chart that's in green.
The page before advertising tactics, if that helps.
And after the graphs for metrics 6A and 6B.
4 and 3, trying to find it.
It's in the dashboard. There you go. Yep, there you go.
Doesn't this come from marketing?
Yeah.
Well, I was just trying, the numbers didn't seem like,
Wait, what was the repeat the question?
I was just trying to understand what the difference between the category that says cost of new membership acquisition and average cost of new membership acquisition, what the difference was.
It looks like one's on a per.
Quarter
yeah.
versus the year, full year.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
Oh, Tim is raising
Thank
his
you.
hand to answer, it looks like.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I think someone answered it. It was an
Yeah.
annual average.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. For that fiscal year.
Any other questions on the dashboard? All right, thank you, Dan.
Making up our time, guys.
Okay, we are now on the questions only portion, which includes development tracker, community operations updates, president's report, report from Inter Arbor Trust, pre-filed legislation, board priority review, and tracking forms. Any comments or questions on any of those? Dick?
Yes. One of the things I'm curious about is on the tracking form, resident requests. There's hardly anything there. We get letters from residents all the time asking questions. How come none of that's showing up on the tracking form? For example, just tonight, Russ and several other people called in about the Meriwether noise situation. And that's just all of a sudden disappeared off the charts.
So I do want to make sure we're careful with our words. Nothing has disappeared off a page. I don't think that's a fair
Well, it was never there,
characterization.
actually.
Right, so nothing
I'm sorry,
disappeared. So there are 2 processes that come in, and the email that came in that was referenced goes on to the board tracking form that is compiled on a monthly basis. And the resident request tracking form is something that I actually clarified this just today, that when a request comes in that a board member during the resident speak out says, we would like to follow up on that, that is captured in the minutes, and that is how we move something onto the resident request form. Or if we receive it via that email and a board member reaches out either to the chair or to the president to say, I would like that captured on the resident tracking log, that is the two ways that it is triggered to go onto that form. We do not have a staff process that populates the resident tracking log because, as you said, we get a lot of emails from a lot of residents that we respond to in a variety of ways, so we don't log every one of those.
Oh, yes, and by the way, I really do think we're doing a nice job of answering a lot of those requests. Letters are very well done. So what you're saying basically is if a board member sees something coming in from a resident, thinks it belongs on the thing, it's our responsibility to put it on there.
That is how it was explained to me the process has worked. In my time, we've only had the one, and it was when the chair indicated that she wanted that on the log.
Okay, well, that's a good explanation, and yes, I would like to have the Meriwether noise thing put on the resident tracking.
Okay. What I was,
Okay, I'm just,
no, I had a question about if it's something we want to put on a future agenda, that's probably not the right place for it. I'm thinking the topics log would be the place we'd actually want it.
okay, well, that's a good point. That's a good point, and let's.
And that's generally where, when residents have come to resident speak out and had a topic, that is generally where this board has put, if they want to take an action on it, they put it on the board agenda topics.
Okay, well, I'll follow up on that.
Okay.
Okay, now, the other question I had, the development tracker, which is always my favorite piece of this thing. We opposed the Lakeview development that was basically going to put a fast food drive-through on one of our parkways, on Stone River Parkway. And Jessica did a wonderful job of testimony on that, and it was, last I heard, it had been rejected, so that was good. Now, there's another one going in right next door, and according to the tracking study, that seems to be okay, but they're taking down specimen trees, there are a number of other things. So I would like to get, hear from Jessica about why she feels that that one's okay and the other one's not. So
I'll make a general statement that they are two separate developments, and I think it's very important to clarify that one development, just because it's in a close proximal location to another, does not make it identical. But Jessica, I see you're on. Is that anything you want to speak to here, or is that something to follow up on separately?
Well, that's a follow-up thing, and yes, you're absolutely right.
Maybe Jess has an
I'm just saying
opinion.
Oh, is she there? Oh,
Yeah.
great. Okay. Yeah, if you want to fill us in on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can speak to this. I think we discussed this in one of the development trackers earlier this summer when they submitted their environmental concept plan, and we had a pretty good understanding of what the project layout was. If you will recall, on the Lakeview retail site that was adjacent to this, our concern was very specific to the location of the building in proximity to the parkway and how that decision of siting the building affected the landscaping and therefore the character of the viewshed from the parkway. This project itself, among many of the other overall aspects of the project, including general site layout, best planning practices, really expressed a lot of the landscape character elements that are found throughout Columbia in how they designed their landscape plan, how they sited their building, and how the viewshed from the parkway is shown throughout the plan and will be felt. So those were the aspects of the overall design and how staff came to our recommendation.
I'm sure, I know you've talked with them, and it seemed to be indicated there that you we're happy with this or satisfied with it. I'd just like to see more information on this. Would I look that up on the planning board site, or where would I look for that?
Yeah, the plans for this project are posted, available online for the planning board agenda for their December 16th meeting.
Okay, thank you. I had one other thing, and that is,
All right, make it quick, please.
very quick. My favorite project on 108 and Columbia Drive, that's the, where it's been through a number of hoops. They just did something on the 30th, and I wasn't sure what. It just gave a date. And another thing is, the word going around the neighborhood is that they're putting that property up for sale. Do you know anything about that?
You're referencing Dorothy Overlook, and are you referencing the fourth item of the development tracker that follows projects?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so on the 30th, their alternative compliance request for removal of, that's related to the removal of specimen trees.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was approved, I believe. Oh, sorry, I'm incorrect. That is under review. So that's the update on that one, is they recently resubmitted a plan on November 30th that is under review associated with alternative compliance for removal of trees.
They want to remove the trees.
Yeah, in general, whenever you're developing a site that has specimen trees on it, you have to submit an alternative compliance request, which normally requires a different replacement ratio than would be required if they were not specimen trees.
Okay, well, I'll have to look at that. Thank you.
Any other questions on this section? I wanted to thank Lakey for her comprehensive report. That was very enlightening.
Yes, that was very helpful, and I did my village report. Did a lot of cribbing there.
Okay, do we have any proposed new topics? Ashley?
Bamboo stands. So I had a question that came up with a resident that prompted me to do a site visit with Dennis. So I wanted to discuss the possibility of doing information sessions for the community, possibly putting some rules out there for residents to not be able to plant bamboo, since it is competing with our efforts to remove it, and other ways to remedy bamboo removal.
So would you like that on a future agenda?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So generally, we just want a thumbs up. Is anyone opposed to putting that on a future agenda? Cool, all right. Sherry?
Yeah, I just want to suggest a resource. The Watershed Advisory Committee has worked on this, and there are people who are currently working on it, very active, so that would be a great resource.
Wonderful.
In your committee, I can send you the name of somebody.
Great.
Okay.
That would be great.
Okay.
Excellent.
And we were talking future agendas.
Yes.
Did Russ's letter get on that future agenda?
I assumed it was already on from our previous, but we can make
Okay,
sure.
I
yeah.
just want to make sure that, because time is running short on that.
The MPP noise thing.
Yeah.
Okay, any other new topics? All right. Give me 1 second. All right, so that wraps up this meeting. Thank you for everyone who has been working on the budget and who will be diligently working on the budget for the foreseeable future. Especially Lynn, Susan, Lakey, all senior staff. I know everybody has had a lot of input in that, so thank you so much.
Happy holidays on that.
We'll get to that. You're stealing my thunder. Thank you to everyone for their robust conversation this evening, and for your sense of humor, because I do appreciate that as chair. It's nice to be able to laugh occasionally, so thank you. I hope no one takes offense at that. So we've decided on these key components. Hope everyone's happy. Thank you, Ashley, for being timekeeper this evening. Thank you to all the residents who came to speak out tonight. And for our next work session, which is January 13th, we have a discussion around the extension of the Minority Business Enterprise Program policy. We will have some discussion around advisory committees in the appointment process, plus whether additional committees may be needed. Legal training from Wes. For a topic yet to be determined, but I'm sure that will be super exciting. And we will have updates from community programs and services from Dan and from community operations from Dennis. And then our final budget will be published Friday, January 21st. Online feedback will take place January 22nd to 26th. And our discussion of that budget will be at our regular meeting on January 27th. Please note, if anyone had on their calendar, we had originally talked about a January 20th budget meeting. We will not be holding that, so And, I just want to say at the end, thank you to everybody and happy holidays to everyone. Please have safe and happy holidays. We've had a lot of stuff that has happened this year. We said thank you and goodbye to Milton. We said welcome to Lakey. And, we're still coming out of this crazy pandemic. Always new and exciting things. 3 new board members this year. So, happy to have you here. And, I want to say thank you to everybody. I also want to say thank you to Andy. He's been a great resource for me and has been super helpful in my transition and supporting information that I couldn't possibly have in my head. And so I want to say thank you to everyone and happy holidays, and I will stop talking now. All right.
Happy on?
All right, can I have a motion to adjourn? Ginny moves, Tina seconds. Any objection? All right, this meeting is adjourned at 9:57 PM. Thank you.